Good evening, everyone. This is the March 15th, 2011 version of the Goffstown Budget Committee. This is going to be organizational night, but we have a kind of transference, so to speak, where we get rid of some of the old stuff and work our way toward the new stuff. Now, Mr. Gross, Selectman Gross, have you sworn in all the new members?
Yes.
Then if we can start with Keith and work our way clockwise, would we give the roll call, please?
Keith Allard. Phil Kendall. Scott Gross.
Richard Fletcher.
Elizabeth DeBrule.
Steve LaRose.
Dan Cloutier.
John Dillon.
Phil Gordon.
Guy Karen.
Jen Getchell.
Francesca Hansen. Lisa Jukes.
All right, and what we have is, I haven't seen or heard from Bill Bates or Ivan Beliveau. When they contact me, will let me know. And John Burt has indicated he would either be very tardy or not here at all. He has some other business he's doing up at the State House. Given that, that takes care of item number one. Number two is on your agendas, Dan Cloutier, Bill Bates, Guy Karen, and Francesca. Terms are ending next year. The terms ending in 2 years, 2013, will be Ivan Beliveau, John Burt, John Dillon, and Jen Getchell. New members for a 3-year term, Elizabeth DeBrule, Lisa Jukes, Phil Kendall, he said Phil, so we'll call you Phil instead of Philip, is that all right? Okay, and Steve LaRose. Board of Selectmen rep who volunteered last night was Scott Gross. And the school board rep, they will be meeting, having their organizational meeting next week, so we'll find out then who's going to be representing in their absence. We have Keith Allard here tonight. Dick Fletcher, is it official that you're back on for another year? They haven't taken it away, so you're most likely gonna be here for a while. Okay.
Maybe I can get out of it.
And Bill Gordon as well?
It's a lifetime.
It's a life, okay, it's, yeah, call it appointment or whatever. Ivan is in the house. All right. Any questions on terms or people? Everybody introduced one to another. New members, do you want to say anything? Hi? No? Well, cool. All excited to be here?
Congratulations, new members. Yeah, welcome to all of you.
Okay, so, members, if you turn to the minutes of our last meeting, last month, which are February 17th, 2011. I emailed those to you, I believe, on Sunday. Do I have a motion to bring them forth to the table?
So moved.
Second.
Who said second? Guy. Bill Gordon, by Guy. Any modifications, changes? Seeing none. For the new members, and I'm going to do this often, we take a vote by a show of hands every time. We don't have to. There's nothing required by law, 91A, to do that. 3 years ago, I believe there was an article on the ballot that requested that all votes be kind of tabulated, and we, as a budget committee, had agreed that we would do that, okay? And that would probably be something that we do again tonight as a budget committee, saying, do we still want to do that? So, until we reorganize, we're going to show it because we're going to go with what we agreed to last year. So if you're in favor of the minute as presented, please signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Opposed and abstained. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 14, and we have 2 missing. That is total. One of the other things we do is if you're abstaining.
Don't we only have one missing?
We have 2 missing. We have Bill Bates missing and John Burt.
Oh, John Burt, I'm sorry.
And if we have an abstention and you want to put a comment in the record, feel free to, if I don't come up to a point of order or something like that, and I'm presuming the abstentions were because you weren't here or didn't read it or didn't feel comfortable of doing it. Is there anything different? Cool. All right. Takes care of that one. All right. I will now recognize Select Chairman Phil Devanza, who's not on your agenda, but we're going to go off the agenda. He wanted to address us tonight on an idea he has. Phil?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to address the committee, and I'd like to welcome the new members and the returning members. On behalf of the Board of Selectmen, we look forward to working with the committee throughout the upcoming year, going forward, putting a budget together. that'll be responsible, meets the needs of the community. And to that end, what I'd like to do is invite members, especially the members that are assigned to the public safety departments, three public safety departments, which is police, fire, public works, for the rep to be able to go on assignments with that department, obviously with the discussion beforehand with the chief or department head in that department, to go for a ride-along with a police officer, or ride along for a plow route, or a trash truck, or training in the fire department. Also, the other thing that you could probably do when you have that discussion with that department head, if there is hopefully there aren't, but if the case arises where there is an emergency situation, that you can observe. But what I would do is I would suggest that you have a discussion beforehand with the department head, so that you can realize where the parameters are, because if you have a police line, obviously for safety's sake they don't want people to cross, but you might be able to be in a closer position to observe. When the opportunity arises, I'm sure the department head, the chief, or one of the other officials officers would apprise you of what's happening on the situation. Just be aware that it is an emergency situation, and that you do need to give the space to the people to do their functions. We hope that that offer can be utilized to benefit, and if there are other members perhaps who are not assigned to that department that might be interested, after another member comes in and gives a report perhaps that somebody else wants to do it, I think if you check with the chief or the department head, I think that could be arranged.
Questions of Selectman
I do.
Devanza?
So even if it's not your department, you can go, you think they'll take you on a ride-along?
Well, what we have to understand is that time schedules are tough. In the past, when I served on the budget committee, we kept it to the department, the assigned person to that department. But since this is something that hasn't been done for quite a while, if there was within a reasonable amount, I mean, I would not hope that 5 people show up on a Friday night wanting to go for a ride-along when there's only 2 cruisers out on the road. So, but I think that could be worked out. I mean, if we were starting early in the course of the development, I think it could be accommodated, and I think that, within reason. And I think that we're all reasonable to that regard, and I think we would all be able to work that out.
So I've heard you mention this before over the years, like anecdotally, you've mentioned going on ride-alongs for one thing or another. How do you think that would kind of add to it sounds fun, but like how do you think that would add to the whole experience,
Well,
the budgeting thing?
One way that I can try to put that, explain it probably the easiest. I don't know how many people are familiar with looking at plans of a house or landscaping on your property or something along that line. But you could take something and lay something out on a piece of paper that's 2-dimensional, lay it out completely on a piece of paper, and it will look beautiful. So you could lay out all your landscaping, or you could lay out a subdivision or whatever on a piece of paper. But when you go to implement that plan and you look at the land is 3-dimensional. Land has up and down, your paper is flat, and trying to take that plan and incorporate that plan out there, sometimes you run into a difficulty because perhaps part of your driveway is on a slope when you go into the actual land, but on paper it didn't work out. So I kind of see it, I picture it as being able to have some of that field work into the discussion to see how things function and everything meshes together.
Jen?
think is a great idea because in some ways it will definitely give us a frame of reference, you know, in the work that we do, although we're not expected to be experts in fire, police, school, administration, yada, yada, but it definitely would help us have a frame of reference to fall back on. Are the department heads open to this? And could you tell me what we could expect with Parks and Recs if we were to work with Parks and Recs as one of the department heads?
Well, I did discuss this with the public safety departments. I don't think that there would be an issue with the other ones. Again, I have not spoken to department head. You also have a Parks and Recs commission that we deal with. But I think that through the selectmen's rep to the Parks and Rec commission, I think that we could probably get that where it would be able to be worked out. When I don't expect somebody to go and become an expert in a particular department. The way I view this is that it gives you a perspective as to what happens on a Friday night, certain nights, so that you can go there and you can see, you know, if you're riding in a cruiser and all of a sudden you hear a call come over that there's an accident on 114 someplace, all right, and there's another cruiser that goes over there, and all of a sudden there's a call. I mean, you might experience a DWI arrest. You might experience going through a breathalyzer. You might experience this and see this firsthand. So what the employees, the men and women that perform these functions in our community, what they go through, just to see what that is. Different things. You see somebody perhaps coming in through booking, getting fingerprinted and all that. Another thing is what I would encourage is if we ever have an emergency situation where the chief emergency management is invoked, that you go down and spend some time and see how that operation works. You know, even if you stop in, if you're assigned to PD, for example, I stop in on a Friday night, see what happens in communication. Just go down there and chat with them for a few minutes. They're welcome to have you in. Come in, see what happens as the calls comes in, how things operate, and so forth. Not to be that you're an expert, but just that you have some firsthand knowledge of how some of the things function, so that as you look at a budget, you can understand how everything interfaces.
Have a follow-up?
Go ahead.
I found it extremely helpful when we didn't get to tour all of the facilities this year, but for me, it was helpful to kind of have an understanding as to what the police department has as far as resources right there in that building, how their system works. It certainly, you know, as Elizabeth said, doesn't help, you know, it may or may not help us with the bottom line, but I think it's really important for us to all have a general idea of what the resources are. So I hope maybe this year we can really make an effort to visit as many facilities as we can, even if it's on an individual basis, that we stop in just to kind of get a better frame of reference. So thanks.
Scott?
I'm thinking, and I'll offer this up. For one, I know that Rick Wilhelmi and Diane Hathaway, they welcome budget committee members. They want you to understand their operation. So, but what might be a good idea is to offer certain dates, or I can work with Selectman Devanza. We'll get certain dates together over the course of the next 4 or 5 months, where we typically are in more of a slowdown mode, where we can schedule more group discussion and or meeting with the department head at their facility, give you a tour. This way, rather than having one person go 1 week, because I want to be respectful of all of our department heads' time. Certainly doing a ride-along is a thing you would do on your own, but if there's facility tours, would probably be best suited in a group-type setting, in my opinion. And certainly we can facilitate at least, you know, 1, perhaps even 2 sessions per facility and department head. So if someone can't make one, you can get it on the other side. And I found that real helpful on both the school and the town side. And we've got 5 new members. You may have a new school board rep who maybe does not know the town side all that well. So that could be 6. So that's a sizable amount of membership that maybe does not have a good working knowledge of the facilities and the operations. And you're not going to get. It's not going to be all of a sudden you have an epiphany and here's what goes on, but it'll help you. I will say this, and I thought Phil was totally on. When you look at a budget or you read things, it's one thing, but when you're actually, I learned more in our floods and when we opened up our emergency command center And that thing went for, 3 and 4 days for each time that we did it. And you're in there and you're talking to police and fire and DPW. You learn a lot about what goes on. And one of the most important things that I learned, I'll give you a good example. We talked about, remember for years, for some of us who've been doing it for a while, remember the communications piece, the radio situation? Yeah. And I remember that, I'll give you a good example. I poo-pooed some of this stuff, and I remember talking to Chief French at the time saying, oh my God, we did this thing and that thing. And so we were at PD, and I cannot tell you how many police officers came up to me and said, I don't care whatever you do, you must do this. I was on this stop, and I was at a domestic violence call, and I had no way of communicating, and it got heated, and I needed backup. I could not get backup. I had to run out of the house, call from a cell phone to get backup, So those are the types of things that you hear when you don't read about them per se, although it doesn't seem as real to you. But when you talk to the officers, and it's like, and you have 4 or 5 of them coming up to you saying, you know how many dead spots are in Goffstown? So there are the needs and the wants, but it just puts it in better perspective, And the same thing with vehicles. You can actually look at some of these vehicles, and again, not everybody here is a heavy mechanical expert, et cetera, but you can see, and you can, they'll let you crawl underneath, and you can see how nice they look on the outside, but on the underside, not so good. It is, hands-on is pretty good experience.
Further questions for Selectman Devanza? Super. Well, thank you very much, Phil.
You're quite welcome. I'll let you do your business.
Cool.
Have a nice evening. Thank you very much.
Oh, Dan, I did have
Thanks,
one more
Phil.
thing.
Okay.
As part of the 250th anniversary, we're having a block party, and one of the things we're trying to do is a sumo wrestling match. And I was thinking about having a budget committee chair and the Board of Selectmen chair do this. So if you guys are willing,
You are
Really?
hilarious, man.
we would.
I thought we were talking about a pie throwing
I'll nominate
contest.
somebody.
Well, that's
or
the dunking booth.
booth.
That's very simple. I was trying to take it to another level, so if there are, anybody who would like to volunteer to take on
Raise a
some
lot
of
of
the
town
money.
square.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sumo wrestling on the town square.
Yeah, it's a cage match type of
Only
thing.
if there's
Yeah.
This is where Elizabeth comes up and says, where does it affect the bottom line?
It's revenue generating.
Yeah.
Dunking tank for
You could
Scott.
offer a deal. Every dollar you spend on the dunking booth is $1 off your taxes.
Yeah, that'll go on the warrant, I can tell. All right, let's segue over to public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to make a public comment? And we'll go to old business. Does anybody have any old business they want to talk about? Besides any other kind of old business? All right, we're gonna go quickly through that. Town reports, sometimes what we do, with the lack of assignees, because we have 5 new people, I didn't indicate individual reports, but if we want to, I'm gonna segue to the school side first, because Keith has to leave in just a little bit. Wonder if you had anything, of course, all the members who were assigned to school side last year are still here. There were 4, 5, no, 1 from the school side is gone and 4 from the town side. So, you're the only one left on the town side, I think.
Please.
Yeah, but
Everybody else is
that'll
gone?
there. But if we have some reports, is there anything hanging with the school? Because the school's on it's on a fiscal situation, and so you're heading towards the end of your fiscal year.
We plan to have an idea on our revenue expenditures by the end of this month, end of March. And we'll start on the 21st working on what would be the cuts to our proposed budget to the fall budget. At this point, I don't have much to share on that. We haven't investigated it as a group. We're looking for recommendations from the administration on Monday, the 21st.
Anyone who had a school last year have some info for us?
I met with Stacy and Reyes for liaisoning to the district or the SAU, and the morning after the election, and we had a good conversation. We mostly focused on looking back at this year's process and sharing our thoughts on how we thought it went, and mostly, if they had any suggestions at that point. I think it was a little early on to, but, I think there's a level of frustration on their part. I can't speak for them, and they didn't ask me to, but just my sense, I think I can say, level of frustration on their part. Maybe wanting to know, I know, again, my sense was that they put a lot, participated a lot, gave a lot of input to the committee, and maybe they're wondering how much the committee listened to that input or understood it. And, recognizing that whenever there's cuts or a decrease in the budget, that their job is that much harder. So that frustration, I think, is understandable. I think it's fair to say they think the relationship with the Budget Committee, there's room for improvement. That the past couple of years, maybe it's the level of frustration has been there. I don't think they were really making any concrete suggestions yet for changes. I encouraged them to actually put if they had some, to put it in writing for us to be able to read, whether it was a half page or a page. I thought that would be productive if they wanted to be specific in critiquing the process. I told them we would certainly look at that and take that as input. So it was a good conversation. I think maybe we'll hear more from them about suggestions for the coming year, perhaps.
Before you go, would it be fair to say that, because you said when there's cuts, I know that the budget that was presented to us was not passed and it went to the default budget, but would it be fair to say the default budget is greater than the previous year's budget?
Well, I think that's accurate.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to be fair. They do
Sure.
have to reduce from what they indicated to us, but it's slightly more than the previous year. It's just not, it's a fact, not a matter of discussion. I saw some hands. Ivan?
I was representing the schools and the high school specifically, and I actually, for whatever reason, ended up going to 3 or 4 of the last school board meetings, so I got to hear a great deal of what went on, and I certainly heard the frustration, I think, that John shared, and I don't think there's any point in bringing up the stuff around the budget and the budget process. I think if I were to be with the high school next year, one thing I'd offered to do last year was police, there's no fire trucks or police cars at the school, but I thought going to school for a day and just sitting, I don't know how you structure it, but just wander around and get to feel the kids. It's been a long time since I've been there. Don't go there. So I thought
Set yourself up, Ivan.
Yeah.
I know, he jumped on it. I got him. So, really, that's about all I have to say.
Did you talk to Frank about that?
Yes, I did.
And did it happen?
Yeah, he was supportive, and
Okay.
the next step was to talk to Stacy about it, which I didn't follow up on.
Okay.
And I could do that presumably this year.
Well, let me share. I think it's a wonderful idea. I don't know if a whole day would be appropriate, but maybe 2 to 3 hours. It could be difficult for an administrator to give up a whole day because you wouldn't be allowed to go throughout the school without an escort.
Okay.
But, no, I think it's a
But I
wonderful
mean,
idea.
for-
And I'll bring it up to, I'm not staying on as chair of the school board. I'll bring it up to the next chair and
Thank you,
advise him
yeah.
or her to give that some consideration and talk to Stacy about it.
Not to be argumentative, but there's a breakfast program and there's a whole world at breakfast time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's another world at around 3 o'clock, so I'm just saying I'm willing to be there. I don't want to tie up a person necessarily. As I said, I don't know how you would structure this. But I do think breakfast program, what goes on in the morning, what goes on at the end of the day, I think that's important to get a real sense of what's going on in the school.
Maybe we could work it out where different administrators take on certain times of the day then. So that maybe-
Punishment duty for, no.
You can be a substitute, Ivan.
I could be a
There
substitute.
you go, just get fingerprinted, get a background check, you're all
Well,
set.
that's what I'm saying.
Oh,
Is
but
that,
I attend the training class.
That's the problem.
well, yeah, so if, there is a possibility though, because you have volunteers that, because, yeah, we have to be careful who is wandering, if we wanna call the word wandering, unescorted, you could ask for a hall pass, or enroll.
Do I get detention if I mess up?
Probably.
That way you can observe how that works
Yeah.
too. In-school suspension would be good too.
And see Bill
What
Gordon,
we don't
because he's
allow is
permanently
no
in.
volunteer people can be in the building and have the possibility of any one-on-one contact
with the children.
unless they've been background checked.
Right, and that's, if that were to happen, if you were to have a background check, perhaps that's something else that you could talk, if it's really that meaningful to you, because I think it would be handy, because, yeah, we don't really want to tie up an escort, so to speak, for a long period of time. I mean,
Well,
I
if you're in,
just-
if you're in a classroom, that teacher could take responsibility for you and just know that she can't just let you leave without somebody else taking over, that's all. I mean,
handoff.
yeah, we can probably work something out
Could
with
I
that.
teach a class in economics maybe or something?
I would have to say the
Yeah.
answer
Going a
would be
little
no.
crazy,
You come in as a guest speaker possibly, but no.
Not budgeted.
Depends
I'd
upon
have
your
to ask
version of
teaching
economics.
credentials.
I just hear a lot of anecdotal stuff from various people at various levels, college professors, their perception of students, so forth and so on. And I've actually talked ironically to some of my high school teachers, they're still teaching. And so there's a lot of, yeah, really.
They were really young when you went to school. Sorry, Ivan.
It's so hard.
Still teaching, yes.
That's not being Goffstown, we don't have anyone that old.
They've replaced the hitching post with parking spaces now, Ivan, so.
Any former pilot, World War II.
We start off laughing, give us a few months. All right.
No, I think we could, something could be accommodated where,
If you'd bring it up.
yeah, I'm gonna have
Actually,
I'll
that's
bring it up
quite
to the
happy.
next chair, after Monday night's meeting, whoever's selected as the chair.
Thank you.
So, the attendance at some of the school board meetings, there isn't anything new, it's all kind of like old stuff, right? It's not anything that would help us from this point going forward?
No, as I said, the majority of it at that, for the, the previous 3-4 months were strictly around budget and so forth. And there was some information around the food service program and, it was very interesting. This is just a perception I got, that there was an incredible interest in having that come out in the black every year.
Actually, it's required to come out in the black every year. It is self-sustaining, we use no tax dollars to support it.
Right.
They have to make a profit in order to pay for the expenses like a new stove, refrigerator, they have to save up to do that.
And why is that?
We made it a self-sustaining project, 10, 12 years ago. I mean, it was at least that, where the decision was made that this is gonna be a self-sustaining program. We're no longer gonna be using tax dollars to supplement it. Actually, local tax dollars, because I'm gonna say, you get
Yes.
money from the state and the federal government,
Right.
that does go towards it, but we're not taking any local taxes to support it.
But my sense of it is there was a lot of pride in meeting those accomplishments of it being a successful program in the sense that it doesn't require any local property taxes, and there was a real desire and effort. And I guess my only comment would be, could that program be expanded into other areas?
Well, there's very few income-generating programs within the school. But I can say that they have exceeded some of the expectations that were put forth for them, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And they're actually looking at a lot of cost savings ones, joining food co-ops, et cetera. So they've continued to try to see if they can find a way to reduce the cost.
I would just, my own editorializing, I would say the degree to which the schools and school board could move in that direction, I think would be helpful. And that's just an editorial.
And more kudos, the prices didn't go up for a long point in time, too.
Hasn't gone up in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
It's really
So
cheap. It's almost cheaper to let your kid buy lunch than it is to make them lunch.
Which is great.
Elizabeth's pretty much correct on that. You're paying $2 at the middle school and the
Yeah.
elementary schools.
Really?
Yeah, $2
Now,
for a whole lunch.
now, if you had a budget committee member who wanted to go during lunch,
$4.50. No, we charge for the teachers a higher price for the teachers.
there you
Yeah,
go.
they
So
don't
you get
pay
the
more.
teacher price.
Yes, you get
All
the
right.
teacher's price.
And make sure you check the lunch menu calendar before you pick your day.
Okay.
Which can be found at www.goffstown.k12.nh.us.
Phil?
I was just wondering if, it's probably more procedural, but you had sent out several emails.
Yep.
And for the new members, me included, getting myself back into your email chains, you sent a lot of different formats and stuff.
Right,
for
can I get
school.
that, can you hold that until we do the new business?
No, you can cover it at that point, but yeah.
Okay,
I'm
cool,
good,
I will
thanks.
do that. 4. Jen, did you have anything on the schools?
Nope. I did ask, but no comment.
I really think in April is when you'll have more information, because the budget will have been decided where we were gonna make the changes in the budget to accommodate the default budget. So I think that's when we'll probably have a lot of information to talk about with principals.
Any questions of the committee members for Keith or any of those who were part of the school last year?
I'm not part of the school, but I got a question for
Okay.
Keith, though. You mentioned the background checks.
Yes.
I presume a police officer has no problem roaming the halls. Do security,
Police
go ahead.
officers are allowed.
Do security clearances qualify as background checks?
We require a state background check to be submitted to us. The RSA requires that we, through the state police, get a background check sent to us. We can't use
Okay.
a background check that's from another job
It's
or
from the
another
federal
application.
government? Okay, thanks.
What's the cost of that background check?
I don't know.
25, 30 bucks?
I'm gonna say $25.50, I think is what it is right now. It's right around $25.
Okay.
Because it's not as an extensive background check as we require for a teacher.
Further questions there?
What about teachers from other districts who have had the background check and the fingerprinting in their own district?
We have to have a specific one. The RSA requires that we have a specific one sent to us from the state police.
And did you have you want the whole name, Francesca, or something shorter?
Checker.
Checker is what you'd like. Well, that's gonna be good for me.
I
Keep
wrote it on
reminding.
my sheet.
Okay, we'll get that in a minute, too. All right, so down to school, how about the town side? Anything interesting going on in the town? Scott, you wanna start?
Sure. Couple of, I guess, more significant items. At Town Hall, some of you remember Janice O'Connell, she retired, and she took another job out in Cape Cod area. So we have just, over the last couple of weeks, we have been interviewing for her replacement, and hopefully we will have an answer to that within the next week. So job offers will be hopefully extended this week, and we'll have some sort of announcement shortly. So obviously that's something that's very important to you folks, because Janice and her staff are the ones who they handle the budget, and they're very important part of the whole process. So that's the town hall piece. On the fire department side, we had just last night we had the chief, and you recall that we were replacing an ambulance, and he was able to secure a demo ambulance that will be the same exact ambulance in terms of the chassis, et cetera, that we just recently purchased, which we're very satisfied with, and it will be all within budget. So that is a good thing. A couple of nice things about this is the Board of Selectmen is going to discuss what we're going to do with the ambulance that is being replaced, still in halfway decent shape. It gets about $12,000 trade-in right now, so we're determining if it's best to trade it in, or should we keep it as a third ambulance and do transport, which we don't have the ability to do now because we don't have the ambulances. Transport is basically when you take someone to another hospital, perhaps even Boston, Dartmouth, Hitchcock, and you're able to bill for that. So it can be revenue generating for the community. So we have to discuss that.
And if I understand what you guys were talking about last night, is that this new ambulance is based, it's similar to our second newest ambulance, whereby down the road, as it has to be replaced, the box
Correct.
can be
Comes off.
saved, so you only gotta replace the chassis.
Right.
And everything with the equipment and everything else just moves from one to another.
So we were.
It's gotta be a lot less expensive.
Right, and I was gonna mention that in the past, when we would have an ambulance for say 5 or 6 years and the ambulance would be gone, these two new ambulances that we have now, you would simply replace the chassis. So rather than having an ambulance for 6 years, we should be able to extend the life of the ambulance for 10 to 12 years and just have to replace the chassis, which would be far less expensive. So, I think kudos should go to the fire chief in terms of reducing the number of apparatus. I think he's reduced now 3 pieces of fire apparatus in the department, these are hundreds of thousands of dollars. Fire engines is $500,000. And then with this ambulance, I mean, I think what he's done here is he has pretty much saved us one replacement cycle by going this route. So these are the types of things that we need to do, and we're quite pleased with that.
Let me see if Phil has the same question I had. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know if I have the same question, but I applaud the fire chief for doing what he's doing and everything else. I do remember, a great plan to do that. I do remember being on the budget committee 6 or 7 years ago when a similar situation happened and went to go do it and we couldn't find a chassis to fit under the box, or the box didn't work with it. They tried to do the same thing. Again, I commend him, and it's a great process. Just 4 years out, chassis change and may not fit underneath that box anymore, and that's kind of the problem that we ran into, is that we'd have to find a used chassis to fit under the box that we had, because the box was still in good condition. Still works, I mean, just, you know.
It's glass half full.
Glass half
It's
full.
okay. But the other thing too, it's
I
good.
still commend him on it.
Yes, and the other good thing is that in terms of maintenance, we're seeing reduced maintenance costs and reduced downtime on the ambulance so far with our experience. So that's the fire department. On the DPW end, some of you may like this, some of you may not like this, but as you know, we built a roundabout at Wallace and Mass that was part of a village and a corridor study that was done a couple of years ago. We had a village planning committee and we had a corridor study. Part of that corridor study was the construction of 2 roundabouts at Wallace and Mass. The other one is Pleasant, and then the third one was traffic reconfiguration on Elm and High Street where the library is. We applied for a grant, which we weren't sure, we weren't too optimistic that we would get this grant, to be quite honest with you. And we actually got a grant for not only the Pleasant Street roundabout, but for also the improvements at Elm and High. And it's a 55% of the cost is what we get, which is about don't quote me on it, over $800,000.
For both?
For both.
Okay.
Yeah. We have to put a match into this. The other part is that there was a development off of Bog Road where there was off-site improvement costs that the developer agreed to, and we're working with that developer. That's an additional 150. He didn't silence his phone, but it's okay.
I don't know what just happened. Tried.
I did that last time, so don't feel so bad.
We got your hammer.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Operator error.
So that's another $150,000 that would go towards the Pleasant Street roundabout configuration. So it looks like what will happen is in this current year, if the engineering work will be done, and then next year there would be actual construction of a second roundabout at the Pleasant Street, Route 13, that intersection, which already almost serves as a roundabout.
It almost exists now.
It
It's
is.
just a double lane turnover. I mean, I'm shocked.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
And then the same thing. There's talk about they call it more traffic calming, but if you're interested, I can get you the plans. They're in the selectmen's room. You can take a look.
Yeah, Elm and High, what are they?
Here's if you really want to know, but this
Yeah,
one's very interesting because this is like the last ditch effort that you can do for Elm and High. There is not much that you can do without a light or without coming up with a loop in the village.
A one-way
Okay?
loop, right.
There's really not much else that you can do down there. So this will be the last hurrah, and I think it might work for, quite honestly, maybe this is probably a 5 to 10 year fix for us, and then we're going to have to do something there due to the traffic counts.
What are they doing?
What?
It's not
they
a loop,
put
and it's not a light.
No, they put in like a couple of raised islands, and it steers. Because what happens right now is people are going so fast through. They're going about 25 to 30 miles an hour. They're going so fast through the village that you're not. People who are trying to make a left, say Elm onto Main, it's really difficult. The only way you can do it a lot of times is the courtesy of another driver. So it's going to slow that traffic down to create more queues. So it's not going to speed things up for people. So if you're looking for a bypass to get from Ware to Manchester and go as quickly as you can through, that's not going to occur. It's intended to slow it down so that people can visually see each other a bit you can execute those turns. But again, short of having a giant loop in the village or 2 traffic lights and a lot of taking of land, there aren't too many alternatives there. Just to, and I know you're an engineer who does this for a living, so you can.
No, I'm just
yeah.
gonna ask, are they in the design already?
I don't think it has been designed.
No.
No.
The roundabout is under contract, though.
Not sure about that either.
Wasn't it 50,000 or something?
It's $50,000 budgeted. I don't think we've awarded a contract for that. I could double check, but
I thought it came out with the same RFP, the one at.
I'm not 100% sure on
Forest.
that. I can double check.
Yeah.
So that's another, I guess, issue. And the other thing that I wanted, if I could, and this affects both town and school, is last night we invited our state reps in. It was a really good conversation. We had our state reps and we had Senator D'Alessandro. I don't know if some of you watched it, but there's a couple significant things that have budget implications. One of which is, you've heard that term downshifting. Basically, these are costs that typically the state has borne, and due to some state budget issues, they're looking to pass that along to the municipalities. One of the biggest ones that we face, both on the town and the school side, is contributions to the retirement system. A couple of years ago, the state contributed 35% of those retirement contributions, and the municipality, paid the rest. Then in the last budget, it went to 30% in the first year, 25% in the second year. Then we were told that it would go back up to 35% for this current budget that the governor is working on now. Under the governor's current budget proposal, it would be a 0% contribution to the town of Goffstown, both municipal side and on the school district side, which is a very substantial amount of money. So we tried to convey to our state reps and to Senator D'Alessandro last night that it's not fair to a municipality and to local taxpayers to say all of a sudden, oh, by the way, we were paying 35%, then 30, then 25. Oh, we're going to go to 0. If that's your intent, if you can stagger it down and give us time to react, that would be appreciated. So hopefully that message got conveyed. But right now, obviously, and we know this from when John Heichel and John Burt addressed us, there was a lot of shifting around, and I think it's just like our budget process starts in October, and there's a lot of sausage making, shall we say. The same thing is going on in the state where there's a lot of give and take, and we'll see what happens at the end of the day. But that's a biggie. On the town side, we get what's called meals and rooms distribution. So if you go to a restaurant, you pay a tax, and if you go to a hotel, you pay tax. That all gets collected, and then it gets redistributed to municipalities. And there is discussion about giving those municipalities less of that money. There is also discussions about getting what's called highway block money. That's, again, we get monies to help with our road program through the state, and they're talking about, I think it's $75,000 less there. So some of these numbers, if we lost our highway block money, $75,000, it would hurt, but it's not as devastating as having to pay an additional, potentially, maybe next year, $300,000 extra for retirement for our municipal workers, and I'm sure it's $600,000 on the scope. So, so those are things we just need to keep an eye on, and if anybody has any questions on that, I'm not the guru there, but I know a little bit.
Any questions for Scott before, or do you want to hear Guy if he has a report for police at all?
I have one. It's not a question, though. One other quick announcement. I'm surprised you forgot. This Saturday at Goffstown High School from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. is the Goffstown Business Expo. And I'm very happy to report that I believe we are full. We have a full group of merchants and businesses coming, and it's a great opportunity to get giveaways and freebies and prizes and discounts. Last year, it's a $2 admission fee. Last year, Hannaford was giving out recyclable bags right in the door, which sell for $1.99. So most people made their money back before they even took 2 steps inside of the room. So I really hope everybody comes and supports local businesses, and it's all a fundraiser for the 250th Committee, and the Goffstown and Pinardville Lions have put this on for us. So hope everybody can make it.
Cool. Any questions about the town? village districts, anything going on, Dick?
Not really right now. Our meeting is next Monday night, the precinct meeting for the year. We had a problem at the treatment plant on the mountain. Some pipes broke and flooded the basement part of it. And I think it probably came to around $7,000 or $8,000 of repair work. I guess we're working with the insurance company now to see how much we'll get on insurance, but I don't see that as a great problem. I mean, we budget money for that sort of thing, so. And, of course, very shortly, we'll be working on some bids for some water mains replacements.
Questions for, yeah, Scott?
I just wanted us to, for some of the newer members, they may not, maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but there are separate, the village and the Grassmere Water Precinct, they're separate entities. They're not part of the town government per se.
And Manchester.
Right, right. And, but we do work hand in hand. I mean, I know that the village is working on some water main upgrades, which the town, they communicate with DPW so that when I know that we're gonna be working on a couple of streets. We're gonna reclaim the street, you're doing the water, we're doing the road and the sidewalk, so that we don't replace a water main and all of a sudden we have to rip up the street and then we just paved, you know, so we try to work hand in hand and cycle them in at the same time.
And we're working on the extension to get to the school,
Yeah.
the kindergarten,
Right.
which we probably got about 2 more years to reach it, but, right now, you know, we'll probably get another 1,000 feet on Elm Street
Right.
after we do Spring Street, if that happens.
Yeah, we've already budgeted that, so
Yeah.
we're good there.
So is kindergarten drawing off a well?
No,
No,
just
they have,
it's just an old main.
they have,
Just an old main?
the town water system stops there.
Yeah.
And they're hooked onto it,
Okay.
but they really don't have quite the flows that they
The
need.
flow and the pressure.
They don't
and
have
For
the
fire
pressure
protection and what have you.
For the sprinkler system.
Yeah.
We have a separate tank for the sprinkler system right now because of the lack of pressure.
So I can tell my wife it'll be 2 years before she gets
Well.
cleaner water.
Well,
Well, it's not gonna be cleaner.
I would say, I
Less
would,
rusty.
I
just
would
be
say
more-
yes, but there's a possibility, you know.
Lake water's
it might
lake
get
water.
faster.
The lake.
Yeah.
You still have brown water?
Yeah, occasionally.
Come on, take it.
We're not going there, not going there.
We run the water before we do the laundry, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's been a problem for 40 years down there.
Mhm. Thanks, Chief.
Other questions for Dick? Bill?
Grassmere Water is running just fine. Tomorrow night, I believe at 7 o'clock is our annual meeting, which is very similar to an old-fashioned town meeting, but usually no more than about 5 minutes long. It's a very social gathering of the intimate neighborhood, and we have one position that will be up for re-election. One of our 4 commissioners is at the end of his term. And should he be re-elected, I believe he'd probably be the oldest elected official in the state. He's 96. That is all that's happening down there, so if you've got some questions.
Questions for Bill? Anybody? The difference between the Goffstown Water District and the Grassmere gets all their water, they buy it all from Manchester. And so you don't see a lot of piping projects and things. They do fix their own hydrants. They do build the town for the hydrants along with Goffstown. I'm smirking because that came up during the budget discussions.
Favorite subject.
Well, it was. It's not anymore, but we'll find another one. So if that takes care of that, that brings us to new business. The first item on the new business is nomination and election of a chairman for the next year.
I'd like to nominate Daniel Cludier as chairman.
Okay. Who said that?
That would be me.
Okay, that's Jen. Any other nominations?
You were a bit like the Gaddafi complex or something, or been doing it for a really long time?
Oh, no, not at all. I'm not coming down with it. I have my big hammer outside, though. Okay. Anybody want to close nominations?
I'll close it.
Okay.
I'll
You guys,
move- I'll move nomination cease and that the clerk cast one ballot for Dan Cludier for
okay, boom.
chairman of the budget committee.
Done. You got it? Yeah, it's the same thing it does. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. One of the things I would like to do is nominate, and we haven't had one for the longest time. We've organized a number of different methods, and what I want to talk about tonight is the organization before I get to the explanation of the email pamphlet I sent out. And we've tried a number of things over the last number of years. We kind of split it up to a school in town and had like a subcommittee chairman get together with you guys. That worked for a little bit, then it stopped working. We tried something different. You guys get any ideas of how you would like to proceed with that? Okay, it's a tough question to say. Everyone, I sent one of these to help us get along. Let me try to explain the bottom piece a little better. You have something before I explain it, Phil?
You've asked the question.
Go ahead. I didn't see your hand earlier.
It's fine. I just moved my head.
Okay.
When I was in the budget committee, it was run both ways.
Yeah.
And I think they both have their pros and their cons. I think when there were sub-chairs, if you will, for town and school, I think it worked a little bit better. It helped. I think it took a little pressure off the chair itself to help motivate the other budget committee members to get involved. We're all very busy people, and find time to knock on someone's door and ask a question sometimes gets pushed to the side. If vote-wise, I guess I would vote for the sub-chairs, if you will.
Agreed. And one of the things I was going to ask was that we do something, and if we go that, it's great, because I took on the task the last couple of years, and it was quite overwhelming for me last year. At the end, we pulled together, and we got some help from about 3 of the members that came in and helped put the presentation, actually do the presentation. Maybe I wish I hadn't had to stand there to listen to it all, but we won't rehash that at the moment. So that might be something we good. I like the idea to help with the subcommittee chairs, in effect, to help motivate to go forward. I would also ask that, I don't know if you want to make it official with either one, if we do that, if we want to come up with nominations, or you just want me to appoint. Yeah, Lisa?
Can I just ask a question? Obviously, I'm new. I followed some of the budget committee last year, so I don't want to get us off track, but what exactly was the method last year?
Not much
As
different.
opposed to what you're talking about now?
The method last year was, I took it upon myself to get a hold of each of the individuals to, if I could use the word shepherd, per se. We had a lot of new members, and I took it upon myself to go through, and all the emails would come to me, and I would put them together. The finances would come, and I'd put them all together and send them out, and all of that stuff. And with it being an election year as well, with a lot of law changes, that's my day job, it became quite overwhelming. The only difference would be the subcommittee chairs would take some of that burden, and for instance, if the finances were come in, we'd go ahead and send it to the subcommittee chairs. Okay, they could look at it, come up, maybe do some analysis, quick analysis, or put it together. Or perhaps if the town subcommittee chair would get together, they could take, you guys got a copy of the town financials that I sent? You got the information as it was sent pure from the accounting here. I have tried in the past to take it all, put it in Excel, put it in each flavor. When I had time, I just set it up so it could be printed, because I know Dick has a hard time getting any of that printed, which will be another question. Does any of you not have the capability of grabbing some of that data and printing it out for your use? Do we need to get the school and the town to print a copy for you and put it in your mailbox here? Is everybody good with that? Okay, so we worked that through, and so anytime we can get that, it would take some of the relief off. So the difference between what has happened last year and going forward, the chair would have a couple of people that he can turn to and look for assistance, for help. Can you rope that together? The other thing I would want to do is then officially appoint through the board that in the case of the absence of the chair, you would have someone that would actually be able to run the meeting, rather than just come and say, I don't know what's going to happen. See what I'm saying there?
Okay, so just so I get it clear, so you'd have a town and a school sub-chair, and then underneath them would be the people reporting out to the schools and the fire department?
You can call it
Not
that way.
underneath them, but.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. Yes, it's not a reporting because you are all elected members, and I keep wanting to tell
Not
you that.
reporting, but sharing information back to.
Yes, it's a methodology to go through, and you're always welcome in this whole loop. One of the things I found sometimes is I got left out, which was a lot of fun. But the subcommittees could take a lot of that burden, information could still come directly from me down through. It wouldn't have to go to the subcommittee chairs, but I'm thinking first of all, and we could talk about that with whomever would be in that role.
So are you talking 2 subcommittee chairs and a vice chair?
No, at this
Okay.
point, probably not.
Okay.
But I'm thinking there would be a senior subcommittee chair, so to speak, that, well,
Well, it's just who, I
it's-
mean, in the past, it was basically who felt more comfortable sitting at the head of the table that night. It's just
Yes.
one of those two people, or those two people ran it together is what happened in
Right.
the past.
Yeah,
Good.
and I haven't missed a meeting in the last, well, put it this way, I've
7
never
years.
missed a meeting when I was chair.
Well, now you've done it.
Hmm?
You've jinxed yourself now, so.
We rescheduled one last year to keep you from missing it.
And I was
That doesn't
okay with,
count.
I was okay of either doing it or not doing, but there were a lot of members who wanted to, we were doing something, yeah, I remember that. In fact, there may have been 2 over the years that, where I checked to see, there was a couple of items, which, if you can pardon the segue, that's a good opportunity to talk about a meeting date. Traditionally, the 3rd Tuesday of the month has a lot of things. It has had the budget committee. It has always been that the Lions have done candidates night on that night. I have since found out why that is. I say, why do they always have candidates night when the
Yeah.
budget committee night? Because I guess their regular
one is there.
meeting is on the 3rd Tuesday. There are some individuals on this committee that would like to participate in that, but I also look at it and say, why? I mean, we've always done what we ought to do. Why don't we, as a group, if there's a better night? Is the 2nd Wednesday a better night for us to get together? That would be last week Wednesday. The reason I picked that is because if you look at the town calendar, this room is available on that night.
But it puts you in between the school board meetings, right? Whereas the 3rd Tuesday usually puts you
Right after the second one.
right after the second one, usually after the second one.
They are the
not
1st and the 3rd.
always. Mondays.
Right, so if you're on the school board and you have to look at the school board, you're there Monday night and then come to the budget meeting on Tuesday.
Sure, understood.
That's how we've always done it. The difference would be 1 week, Monday could be, let me segue back to the school side, okay? One of the things we've asked the school, if you are chosen to speak to a school or look at the MS-27 category, you take a turn going to the school board and seeing what's up. Which means if there are 5 members, that means once every the 6th week, if it all rotates well. And I think that makes it so you would go to maybe 4 in a year. And what we expect the town is to actually sit and visit, and perhaps if you're on library or Parks and Rec or something like that, they have sub-meetings. The DPW, what is their committee?
It's a solid waste
The Solid
commission.
Waste Commission or something. Sometimes they've asked, or you wanted to participate with that or something of that nature. That was the segue. So it's not as if we're asking you to go to every single school board meeting, but we'd like to rotate. So as that happens, let's roll back to what's your thought process, Phil?
What's my thought process?
Yeah, because I'm not sure I completely understood the.
Well, I think I think everyone should put in their ballots, or whatever you wanna call them, their forms as to what they think their what their favorites are, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
And then you'll figure out who's gonna be the school and who's gonna be the town from that, and then from that group, you would select, whatever you wanna call it, pick a chair of that
Oh,
town
yeah,
side or
right.
school side, and then,
Okay, we're back on that piece. Yes,
Yeah, same process.
Yes. Yeah,
But on the meeting dates
but on the
there,
meeting date.
Oh, on the meeting dates.
On a meeting date itself.
I was just saying that, you know, it's nice to have is, I mean, there's a lot to go that happens in the school in a small, you know, group. So, you know, for them to have that full month in, I mean, no matter what, you're gonna have two meetings before our meeting. It's just usually the
In a-
months.
Yes.
It's not, you know, end of one month, the beginning of the second month. I mean, it's just been traditionally after the second school board meeting usually is when we've had, but traditionally, I mean, it's time to change things, you know? Let's shake it up. So, I mean, I'm good, I'm good with that. I was just pointing out, it's been usually after the second school board. That's all I was saying.
To be the first attendance at a school board? Or to have a meeting on a Wednesday or
No, I was just
Tuesday?
saying, our meetings on Tuesdays.
Yes,
The third Tuesday has
Yes.
traditionally always been after two
in a month.
in a month.
Okay.
Moving it to the middle
The middle,
week.
yeah.
Is to get you one of that month and one from the previous month, that's all.
Here's one of the things I was thinking about, because a lot of times with the new software, it has been more likely than not that Ray has sent the financials within a day, two, maybe three after the end of the month. The books are being closed that well.
Yes.
So with the school, there's enough time. We've had, with the town, it's been traditionally taking a little longer, and we don't get those until maybe the end of the second week, a couple of days before we meet, which then the people doing the town are scrambling to try to get to it. So I'm saying, why don't we just work a month behind? So if we get, well, the thing is, what is better, try to scramble or try to get real data of when you talk, so you get your data, so you have your meeting, you can get your financial data after, this is the budget committee meeting. With that financial data, all you have is a history of the previous month. Then you can talk to your department head and see what's going on this month. What is happening that's different from the year-to-date? So you have, from my perspective, a better hardcore solid data that everyone has been able to look at and suck up and feel like, and you're gonna know what's coming up. That's all I'm suggesting. I'm not
I'm okay with
necessarily shaking
either one.
anything up.
Either one works with me.
I'm okay. There's also, if we look at the town calendar,
Or
the
third Wednesday.
capability of having not Tuesday,
Or Wednesday.
but Thursday of this third week. There's nothing going on in this room.
Wednesday's not available?
Doesn't planning
is-
board meet then?
It is not.
They
I'm
do
not
first
sure.
week, huh?
They do first
It is. Let's go back.
No,
Let me
they
get,
do second and fourth.
Thursdays aren't good in general.
Thursdays are not good in general.
Get another one.
Okay.
Thursday's
So-
no good?
No, I was just,
Whenever there's
it's
a
fine.
parent night, it's on a Thursday.
Yeah,
Whenever
Thursday's
there's
a little rough.
Ah, okay,
Thursday,
so
Scouts
we're,
have a night.
which is good. So we're back to Wednesday, or keep it on the third Tuesday.
I make a motion that we go on Wednesday just to shake it up.
I'll second it.
You like that?
And everybody can join the Lions Club.
Sunday.
We're gonna sit here all night talking about Tuesday or Wednesday, I mean.
Right.
Good. Well, the thing is, we've got 14 people here tonight. Okay, if we change it to the Wednesday, are we gonna get 16 people?
You never get 16, you hardly ever get 16 anyway.
Hardly ever, but
Yeah.
we've done it a couple of
Yeah, no,
times,
it
which is
happens,
great.
but it's
Can we
fine.
get the majority of people to get here? So, all right, those that can make it on the second Wednesday of next month, can I see a hand, Joe? Who can make it
Who
here?
can make it?
Who can make it? Who could be here at the second Wednesday of
What's
next
the
month?
date, Dan? 6th, I think it is.
No,
Just
no,
going to
the
look
second
for it.
Go
Wednesday's
for
gonna be the,
Well, your question is, when I say that,
It would be
is
the
that,
12th.
I'm just
Someone
starting
may
with
have-
next month, and I'm gonna
okay.
go to the month after that
Okay.
and see.
Dan,
Yes.
might you have a problem with John Burt because he's a state rep and I
Well, he
think,
has the same problem with tonight.
oh, that's tonight
Yeah.
too?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I thought
I
Wednesdays
thought
they were up
Wednesday's
there
the
a lot.
busiest day.
Yeah.
Wednesday is when they have, not all the time, and I'm not sure if it's the second Wednesday, so we'll have to find out.
So you're looking at the 12th, the 10th.
Bill Bates, when he's out of town, he's out of town,
Right.
so it won't matter. I
It's the
don't think.
13th of, April.
Oh, Wednesday, I'm looking at Tuesdays.
You wrote it on the minutes, I could've just looked at the minutes.
What's my calendar on here?
13th, 11th, and the 8th. That would be the next three.
Where is my calendar? This is really great PC.
Off to the left.
I was on board with Tuesday.
Where's my calendar?
see, I like it.
So we can make it, I can be here next, I can be here on the 13th. Who can be here who cannot be here on the 13th? Let's do that. Of April. Okay, then how about the 11th of May? Then who can't not be here, then let's go shake it up. If it doesn't work, we can always jump back, right?
Third one? Third one?
Let's do it every other month.
Second,
Sorry,
second
I'm so
Wednesday.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
Now, I was getting ready this weekend to come, and I'm saying, man, it's like forever that I haven't seen these guys. Coming off a budget season, it's, twice a week, it's always, interesting to stop. Let's look at the calendar.
Are we booking dates?
I'm looking to make sure, when I talked to Catherine, they were all available. And I have to find, click on calendar, and the calendar comes up. So, the Selectmen had a non-public meeting, but that wasn't anything. That was in March, that was last week.
That was interviews we did.
Okay. So, April 13th is available. Okay. May 11th is available. And one of the things, actually, the third Wednesday is this room is available on the third Wednesday, but it's also the library trustees and Parks and Recs meeting.
And the library, right, library and Parks and Rec.
Library and Parks and Recs on the same night. And you know the bad part about that is,
Choose
on
the
the
same
budget
person.
committee,
Usually the same person.
it's usually the same person, and they have the meeting on the same night. That's a toughie. But it looks like it could either be one of those, it's like the library and the parks would never see a budget committee member if we did it on the third Wednesday.
Well, that's not nice.
Library doesn't like that.
No, they don't.
Well, we were talking about the second Wednesday, though.
We are talking the
Right,
second
right,
Wednesday.
right.
And if you guys are good with the second Wednesday, I'm gonna drop the subject, and I'm gonna put the announcement out, we're
Good with
going the
that.
second Wednesday.
All in favor?
Thank
Say
you.
aye.
You guys wanna actually vote on it? You can. It's usually at the call of the chair,
Yeah,
but
so you did make a
It's
motion.
been motioned and seconded.
I don't remember accepting the motion, but I can. Okay, second Wednesday it is. Okay, let's go back to the form. Do you all have your forms with you?
No?
All right, well,
Yes.
we'll get, it's on there, that's okay. Let me see if I can't explain it a little bit. Now that we've talked about it, you either get assigned to speak to one of the department heads on the town, or you get assigned to speak to one of the principals or at the SAU for one of the schools. The town is called the MS7 form, which is the accounting form that gets produced by the budget committee that goes to the Department of Revenue, which then gets summed up to go to the deliberative section. The school, it's called the MS27. In the town, the MS7 form itself pretty well mirrors the departments. So when you have the administration, that MS7 total that the budget committee has to work from is that. So when you look at the department, you look at their budget, you look at their numbers, you're actually analyzing the MS7 form. On the school side, and that's why there are two columns on the school side, there's regular programs. Now, there are regular programs in every school, okay? I wanted to ask you guys if you wanted to try something a little different with the school, because when we get all the reports, when we get the MS27 report from Ray, and we can ask for different reports, it's consolidated. All the schools are consolidated into the regular ed program, okay? Because monies can be spent at any line level. It can be done by school, it can be done by MS27. It's an idea I came up with, wanted to talk to you guys, maybe we'll wait another week or two to figure out how we want to do that, peruse through some of the reports that I sent you last week, or Sunday, to find out and get a lay of the land, okay, and how you're doing things. Because it's hard for me to explain because I look at it all. And I like to look at the whole 1,100, 1199, because that's how the budget is based on when we actually pass it. And it wavers up or down. But when you have the children who move in this huddled group of 5th graders up to 6th, up to 7th, 8th, and then they change schools to go to 9th from the 4th, and that 1,100 budget kind of bubbles up. So when you look at it At a school level from year to year, you might see some bubbles. And when you look at it at a total, it should be closer to what all the kids are doing. It's only the seniors, the number of seniors who graduate versus the number of kindergartens coming in. How does that balance? That's the only two things that fall off and come on. So there's two ways to look at it. And that's what I was gonna suggest, that maybe someone take responsibility for looking at that category and report on it, as well as looking at the expenditures of just your school. How is it doing in tracking towards the budget? Don't know if it's a good idea, don't. Phil, you've been on the school board, you've been the budget committee. Anybody can make a comment, I mean.
Threw me under the bus there. You just threw me under the bus.
Not at all, I'm just saying, I don't know if you have any ideas, whether you're thinking that's a good idea or bad idea. I'm looking for some, I mean, John, you've done the school.
I don't know, on the surface, it sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
I can see the benefit of what you're saying, for sure. I mean, opposed to looking at one school and seeing how it fluctuates based on
Doing it both,
classes, sizes.
I would like to do that as well.
No, I understand. I mean, looking at it just at the school and looking at how it fluctuates in school, the numbers graduate, but if you look over the 12 years, you're right, you should see a more straight
A more
line.
stable, yeah.
I don't know if the way you're presenting it is I mean, the way I understand it, you're saying someone who, basically the 4 or 5 school, people on the school side are gonna have to then look at not just their school, but also the grouping of lines for the whole district
Yeah.
or the town.
Yes.
You're throwing an extra piece on that, I guess.
Kind of. There is kind of an extra piece, because it's an MS 27, it is.
Because the town is, the way they set up their budgets matches the MS7 so closely that you don't have to do a similar thing.
Right, and not wanting to blame it on the town or the school, this is something that the state did.
Right,
We don't have a choice.
it's just the way the things are set up.
Yeah.
I know that the school is trying to get it closer in line, but there's
Right.
only so close they can get.
But there's gotta be a reason for this. I mean, I'm not just coming up with this idea just because it's a fun thing to do. I'd like to have a good reason for this, and the whole reason is to get to what we just finished doing, okay? Trying to understand budgets that are requested of us. And when we get a budget that's requested of us, it gets rolled up into MS 27. And so my thought process is, someone who's been looking at this for 9 months, 8 months, 9 months, can take a peek and say, you know, historically, I've seen this, and the number is here, and I see it in these kind of areas. Versus looking at a school as well and saying, well, I'm looking at this school, and it's doing this, and the reason for that. Maybe by getting both of those, we can understand it a little better. Scott?
I think that, I kinda like the idea, and for one particular reason, is that last year, there's a lot of discussion about trying to have some quantitative analysis, some comparison with other districts, the state, et cetera. Well, this is the apples to apples comparison that you can say, okay, regular education, what percentage of regular education does Goffstown spend to its total budget? And you can look at Amherst, Bedford, Hollis Brookline, it doesn't matter, and say, okay, they spend 2% of their total budget on regular ed, special ed. If you did special programs, are we seeing any increases in the number of kids that may be, coded in that respect? We talked a lot about support staff. We talked a lot about administration. Well, it would be nice to say, okay, well, what percentage of the budget in Goffstown goes towards those lines? And then what is the state average, and what are some surrounding communities? Because I often hear that, well, we may be top-heavy in administration or in support services or guidance, those types of things. But the only way to really truly know that is to look at the actual MS-27 line to see what percentage of our budget goes towards that, and what's the reason, for that. So I think it's a pretty intriguing route to go. Will it be a little bit more work? Yes. But I think it does provide you with a little bit more comparison, if that's what this committee wants to do.
And I agree with that.
We could take a shot.
Okay.
I would,
Shake things
If
up, Bill.
it doesn't work, we
Okay.
don't continue on with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking for ideas. There are a ton of ideas that we also came up with at the last meeting that want you guys to think about. This is now March. By our May meeting, we should have a pretty good idea to be into a very deep discussion about direction we would like to request the governing bodies on a presentation of a budget, a level of a budget, because we're coming from one area, that's what we believe economic times are allowing us to spend, okay? Versus the other side, when you're on a school board or you're a governing body, you're coming out, what are the people asking us to do? What are we trying to get done by that? And somewhere we're supposed to meet, okay? And that's what we're trying to do. So in May, we ought to have that earnest discussion. So before summer gets here and the thought process starts to go, because it's not only done, we're ready to start again. It's this cycle that we get into, and we just got to get going again. And it worked well last year, coming up with an idea before July, going out and saying, come on, let's try this. And maybe we can explain ourselves a little better to see what kind of scenarios and why the scenarios we're trying to do, and perhaps some of these site visits would help on starting to explain. Your department assignment is not to be, which I include schools, is not to be an advocate for that assignment, but to be a base and a wealth of knowledge on what is happening in that assignment, if you can be, okay? And sometimes it gets easier than others. And sometimes you don't get answers, sometimes you do. You are free to inquire of your assignee all the questions you want to. I mean, they're all ready for this. I'm not so sure about the school yet, but I know the town department heads are ready for this. So if you're on the town and you have the particular department head, you find out when you can meet with them, have a telephone meeting with them. You hear something going on, fire off an email. I'm sure they'll email you back. Please do that. And get going so you know what's happening. Scott?
I just wanted to add one thing so we're on the same page. I know we had concerns with our department heads about having a lot of different budget committee members calling them and asking them questions. If you could clarify that.
I would like it to come from one place, okay? As a member, as an official questioner of the budget committee, it would be best, okay, if it all came from one. If you had a rep, okay, contact that rep, budget committee member to budget committee member, saying, I'm looking for this, and let them form that communication channel. So, and then the department head and you have a rapport, so you can either go over it when you meet, or they can email you back and forth, and you feel free to disperse it to the group. I'm not going to say you need to come through me. We are all elected members. We are all equal. Each one of our votes counts for one, okay? So how we organize ourselves, my job is to attempt to apply the rules that we have agreed upon that we will work, okay? But in no manner is the chair the boss, so to speak. You can't overrule the group. It doesn't happen. I mean, there's some point of orders, okay? If something's not going right, feel free to give a point of order. We just want to do it in a proper way. And if you want to do something, and, jokingly or not really jokingly, when we get into the point where we're making motions in seconds, what Phil and Scott did have been somewhat totally appropriate, except that when the motion is made, it's got to be acknowledged by the chair before it gets that second, just to make sure we're going through the orders and the steps. And there's been very few times where I believe I've been able to accept a motion, and I would give my reason for it, and if you guys wanted to overrule it and say, no, we want to change the rules and do what we want, we've done that a couple times too, because that's what we do. We just need something to move with. Ivan? And then I'll come back to Guy.
Just a suggestion in terms of possible focus. I mean, we talked last year, we've talked certainly about the town and the schools and their wants and needs. But another conversation we had often was the state of the economy and what people would want to pay for taxes. I mean, there is a revenue side to this whole conversation. And for instance, in a lot of homes, maybe most homes, income determines a budget. So you take a look at what you make, your spouse, whatever. In a household, most budgets are determined by income, by revenue. So you take a look at that, And given that the budget committee, in terms of some people's interpretation, is a check and balance mechanism. In other words, it's the prerogative of the budget committee to determine the level of available funding. So one of our functions, and one big function, is to take a look at what kind of money are we gonna have to spend. Then that determines the budget. So I would suggest that we take a long, hard look at economic indicators in our environment, in our state, in our local community, and in our government, because we've already heard from state reps that things are difficult in Concord. Well, things are difficult in Concord because things are difficult in Washington, D.C. Concord may not be getting money from the federal government. We might not be getting money from the state, so forth and so on. So I think we really need to determine right up front, are we gonna be revenue neutral? Are we gonna cap a property tax? Are we willing to increase it? Do we feel that, the town could absorb a 10% increase? Does it need to be capped? Does it need to be 10, 20% reduction? I think those conversations right up front, based on the realities of what's happening in our state. For instance, New Hampshire's ranked about 15th in the nation for underfunding of pensions. I mean, that's an issue. New Hampshire also ranks about 15th in the nation for underwater mortgages. I mean, these are taxpayer concerns. And given that we are advocates for taxpayers, I'm suggesting that we put that hat on and we determine what we think is a reasonable suggestion or a baseline for level of expenditures. And for that then determines the budget. I would hope that would be part of it.
That is certainly a way we can go as a group. What we can do is try to come together with what kind of statistics would be meaningful for us. I've heard some statistics for me that aren't hard enough for me to make any kind of determination, but would have to be something that's a little harder. Did I see a hand after?
Guy was before me. Didn't you have your?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think Guy-
I was not in that direction at all.
Okay.
I was just gonna reiterate
Yeah,
something
and
that
I got back to Elizabeth and back to
Scott had said earlier, that last year, funneling questions to department heads through the particular
Yep.
budget committee liaison. If I had a question of Carl, I called Kathy.
Yep.
I had a list of questions for the fire chief, I sent them off to Christie, and let her, she's the one who's been
And that-
dealing with
that
it.
worked well.
That worked great.
And now, not only does that work well for the chain, it gets that department rep, your budget committee rep, understanding, gee, I guess I'm not gonna ask them that question too, and they're getting the same question multiple times, so you can funnel those in, and that works well.
Yeah.
You all agree with that?
Mhm.
Okay, so when we get the assignments out, we'll
I was
figure it
asked a
out.
few questions of the police department
Yeah.
that I already had the answers to. So the chief wasn't bothered with it.
I have a
That topic? Okay, I'm gonna get back to Ivan's topic, but we'll stay on this one first. Jen?
And I also think it's helpful when, for example, if Guy had a question and would send it to me for Maple Ave, when I came and reported it back to the group, I think it was really helpful for everyone because it answered
Yeah.
other questions instead of just emailing them back to
Yeah.
Guy and not keeping everyone in the loop. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's a good system.
Elizabeth, then over to Lisa, we're back on the
This-
economic?
Yes, this is back on the economic thing. I know that this committee spent a lot of time last year talking about the economic picture. And this is a little bit on both the town and the school side, but on the town side, this obviously is a very important concern, the state of the economy. And I'm looking back at some of the notes. I know that in the last meeting, John Dillon made a comment about a lot of the things people were saying were anecdotal. As you said, some of the data, people are getting data from a variety of different sources.
Go ahead.
Well, I really think that since this is such a big piece of what we do, we need to have some really serious, reliable data. And I think, this is kind of an odd request, I know, we have a budget of $1,800 for this committee, and I don't think we spend it very often.
Yeah, we do.
Do we really?
Mostly on our scribe.
Well, she's worth it. But I think we should consider hiring somebody like an economics professor, somebody who doesn't live in town, so who has no personal financial stake, to put together a report on the economic state of Goffstown and have all that information in there with all the different statistics and indicators that people find would be necessary and accompany it with an analysis. This is how you're doing. Compare it with some other towns. This is, because I know that last year in the school discussion, almost all of the discussion period for the school budget was spent in an argument between Scott and Bill Bates about the state of the economy and how do you calculate unemployment rates. I mean, and no offense, but I mean, that made up a huge part of the discussion. There are so many things that we're going to argue about that are a matter of opinion. It seems ridiculous to me to argue about things that are a matter
Discuss them.
that are a matter of
We're gonna
fact.
take the opportunity of discussing.
Okay,
them.
but
PC.
let's not discuss things at length that are a matter of discernible fact.
Yeah, that's
Let's
why I'm
get them
thinking the
established
facts, the
and
facts,
then
the
use
facts.
them as a basis for the discussion.
I've got Lisa, then I've got Scott, and then back over to Guy.
I feel like there's so much I have to say, but I'll try to be short. I guess, sitting here, I've watched from the sidelines. Now I'm in the ring at the table. I guess I have a couple really important questions. Dan, your style, it's hard because I feel like I like to talk about something, wrap it up, move on. So this is going to be a lot for me to get used to.
This is not the normal style.
Okay, good.
Okay,
That's good.
this is
That's
not
good
what
to
we
know.
normally do. This is, and I'm trying to wrap my head around what we're doing.
Okay,
Because
that's
we're
good,
flipping
'cause I'm
around too
having-
much.
It's never gone like this
It's a
before.
little
I would say.
Okay, all right. So I'm
Just
kind of
every other time.
I'm all over the map here, but a couple, just to respond to Ivan, a question that I have, I guess, is, you said that we're an you can say advocacy, I can say advocate, we're advocates for the taxpayer, the budget committee is. I question that. I know that last year, there was discussion as what is our goal, what are we trying to do, what are we accomplishing? I mean, I have read some of the RSAs. From what I ascertain, the job of this committee is to create a budget, to create budgets. It's not an advocate group for taxpayers, unless I am wrong, and if I am wrong, please tell me. So that's a concern of mine, because it was a vein I saw that ran all last year. Number one. Number two.
Okay, before you go to number two.
Yeah.
Can we handle number one?
I don't
This is the way
know.
I like
I
to
don't know
do
if
is
we can do that.
dissect things, and we'll try to
Okay,
do
go
this.
ahead. I'm gonna forget number two. Can I just write it
Yes,
down?
please write it down.
Oh, I already did. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, that's good, because I definitely would have had to write it down. There's nothing in the law that says we're advocates for anyone. Our job is to create a budget for deliberation. Each one of the 16 people coming to this table have their own methodology on how they want to create a budget. I don't agree with the indicator that you said that you saw that vein running through. I don't think it was, let me put it this way, I didn't see it running through the budget committee. I saw that vein being spoken at almost every single meeting, but it wasn't the contributing factor for the committee as a whole as we went forward. Do you understand what I'm saying there?
I do. Then we differ in opinion, and we're entitled to.
Okay, so, yes.
I mean, you saw more of the committee, obviously, than I did, so, and that's fine.
It's the purpose that you've indicated that we feel we are an advocate for the taxpayer, is where I'm coming from, because you can call it whatever you want, and we can go around the room. I feel I am here to try to put forth a budget that is reasonable and affordable for the taxpayer, because that's where we're starting from. That's how I have read the laws, and I believe my job is to come because, one, we're elected by the people. There are 4 members of this committee who are not elected by the people, but they're still part of this committee. They are coming from, and you can see it all the time with the selectmen's rep and the school board rep, where sometimes they will abstain and read into the record, I haven't been given direction by my board. Some of them have said, I am voting the way my board wanted me to vote. So they are advocates for their board.
I gotcha, and I understand. I guess what I'm saying, and I guess what helped me in your response was that we each bring to this our own background, our own opinion. But we are elected by the taxpayer, and I got that. But I'm elected probably by different taxpayers than elected Ivan. So, I mean, we do come, and no offense, we're just, different people would have voted for me over you. I mean, that's a fact. So we do bring our own perspective, but I guess what I just want to make sure I'm clear on is that we are all here, with what you said, I would agree with, to create a prudent, practical, affordable budget that also takes into account the services that our town and schools are providing our community. I would tag that on it, but that's, I
Right.
don't wanna argue
I-
that with you.
No,
I
no,
just wanna make
it's-
sure we're here to create budgets and.
Right. It's the second part of it
Discuss. We're
that I might take exception for. I don't believe it's our job to figure out what the services are that the people are needing and wanting. That's why the governing board is there.
I'm not, I said take into account. So
Okay.
take into account how the money affects those services. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely. I agree with that totally.
Okay, that's what
And
I'm
before
saying.
we go around, can I ask if anybody has any
Yes,
comments
feel
on that
free.
piece? Because that is a great conversation to start with, so that we can all figure out what it is, and everybody should be able to,
I'm still reserving my right to comment on something else, but.
yes, and
I
I've got
believe
that.
the New Hampshire Supreme Court at one point said that there exists a natural tension between a governing body and a budget committee. They are looking, there's perhaps the needs and the wants there, so I used to get riled up sometimes at some of these meetings. I'm trying to do a better job, but there is that tension, and sometimes passions do.
So far, so
you know,
good.
So far, so good.
It's a new year.
New year. But I think it is, and I guess that same tension exists, I can tell you, as a selectman, and even when I was on the school board, between what a department head or a principal wanted, there was always that natural tension. So anytime you have a check and balance or other people with different roles that they have to play, there's gonna be discussions about them.
Sure.
That's all I wanted to say.
Well, and even within this group, and I totally get that. I guess I just wanna be clear going forward what we're working for.
RSA 32, a budget in an MS7, MS27, and MS37 totals to deliver to session. That's our goal, on time, after our public hearing. Ivan?
I have to preface this and say, none of this is personal. This is absolutely.
no.
None of this is personal. And it's always and I like that term, it's that dynamic tension between two different ideas. I mean, my wife is watching and nodding her head. I mean, we argue about stuff all the time, but we come up with a better number, or we come up with a better idea based on that. So in my honest opinion, I mean, we have incredible people in town who can prepare budgets. We pay them over $100,000 a year. They get compensated tremendously. They're in the school, they're in the town. They are in the trenches. They know all the data. I don't think most people in here are qualified to budget a town or a fire department or a police department or a school department. I don't think any of us. I'd have to spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and frankly, I'd want 100,000. You give me 100,000, I'll do it. I'd do it in a heartbeat. But I can't do that. But what I feel I'm very capable of doing, based on my personal experience, is determine what's looking at the big picture, the macro, not the micro, the macro, and come up with a level of available funding. And in my opinion, that's the purpose of RSA 32 and its description of a budget committee and how they work. To look at the macro, to come up with a number that it's like being a general manager in an operation, and you say, look, based on our sales forecast, whatever, this is what you have to work with. It's like that. That's my opinion.
Anybody else on point 1?
No, I was point 2.
Okay, no, well, Lisa's got point 2.
I do? Oh,
you
my
wrote it
second
down.
point that I was gonna make? Oh, yeah.
You wrote it down.
No, I just said, you had said at one point that by May, we wanna talk about a direction that we wanna go in. You said something about, in May, we wanna come back. I didn't know what you meant by that.
Relates to point 1. What do we want to do? Do we want
Direction.
to say, okay, Ivan, you have from my perspective, an obvious affinity for the statistics in the macro level. Do you want to come back? Feel free to come back to the committee and suggest some of the information in the hardcore data that we could decide whether is pertinent or not pertinent to our discussion to come to creating a budget. Everyone else, come to the table. I mean, we always talk, and Scott loves to do some of this, he's talked about comparison with the other 2 towns. Sometimes it doesn't help me at all, because I look and this is just me, I look at what we are doing, I can look at some of the other towns as a comparison and say, how the heck can they do that? I mean, for the longest time, we said, how the heck can Hooksett run their fire department like that? We found out. They budgeted all of their payroll taxes in administration. And so it artificially reduced what they were promoting as a budget. And so it didn't make sense. Once you put that back in, we were doing a better job. And so those are some of the discussions, but sometimes they help, sometimes they don't. I mean, Elizabeth said, let's find some stuff, and I agree, let's find some hard facts that we can all, we don't have to agree to them, but we don't have to sit here ad infinitum to use that if we're not going to make them part of what we're gonna talk about and think about to come to something. You are free to bring something with you to say, this is the reason why I'm gonna vote. When we get to the point where a motion is made on the floor, okay, to do something, you get to bring that with you and say, and try, and that's why we get into debate mode, because it's a debate, and what you're trying to do is convince someone else to vote the way you're gonna vote because of the reasons you're gonna vote the way you vote. Ivan might be statistics. You might come to say, well, I think we have enough money to fund that particular program because I think it's a worthy program. It's doing, however you want to come to that table. What we want to do, what I'm thinking of, is how do you guys want to rule yourself to get to that point? When do we want to do that? How do we want to do that? Elizabeth?
Kind of a follow-up on this, and not to beat a dead horse, but I mean, another advantage to making some sort of, to have some sort of report with actual data in it. It could be disseminated to the department heads before they make up their budget. I mean, there have been a lot of statements, and I've heard a lot of people, and frankly, I am skeptical of some of the comments people have made about their experience of economics times in Goffstown. But if I'm wrong, then it would be good to have, I mean, that's an important piece of information. And if it goes to the department heads beforehand so that they know what the town is looking at, maybe it would influence their decisions and to get some of this stuff out of the way before the budget comes to us. On the whole issue of comparison, I know that this came up last year. You mentioned using, wasn't it the LGC information, and there were some questions about that. There have been other attempts to make comparisons, and on the school side in particular, I think that we need to look at some of the information that is at the Department of Education, some of the statistics that we might find relevant, and try and get to the bottom of it, make sure we can make a valid comparison. Things like, what is the average teacher's salary? They're going to be in a contract negotiation next year. We should know if our teachers are paid more, less, or the same as what most other teachers are paid. Before we get the budgets, try and get through some of this stuff in these months before, so that we have some data, because we can't do it once the budgets are delivered to us. There's too much else going on. The time to do is now.
Just go one step further for you, Elizabeth. A couple of your comments I took as if you should either be on the school board or be a selectman in order to do what you're thinking of doing. It's not from my position being on the budget committee, I believe that's what it is, a governing board kind of action. Like commissioning a study to do this. From my before the budget would be more of a governing board kind of thing, because they do not report to the budget committee.
That's true.
Because you can
But
tell.
if it's one of the main things that we use to make our budgets, then it could be in the purview of this committee. I mean, if we need that information.
We could do that. We could do that for ourselves, but not necessarily to hand it to the governing boards in order for them
True.
to do what they do. And that's the piece I'm coming from, is that there's a segregation there. And we can talk about that, and we have a budget, we have funds, but I'm not so sure.
It would be a public document, though, so anybody
Absolutely.
could request it.
Yeah. Right, that would be something. I'm not so sure I'm in favor of it, but let's keep that going as ideas of what to do. And I saw a couple of actually I saw a guy's hand first to talk about this point, and then I saw Scott and then Ivan.
Okay. I just want to make a comment on the idea of the matters of discernible facts and the thought about, bringing an economist in to bring us the facts. For every economist, that's an interesting idea. But for everyone who's going to say this is affordable, there's another one that's going to say it isn't. To me, what's affordable is what the voters are telling us. For 2 years in a row now, they've told us what they can afford. That's a bigger responsibility, when I get this message from the people who put us here to represent them, they're the ones who are determining what's affordable. I don't care if an economist comes in and tells them you can afford A and you can afford B. You know, the directorate that I work for, a week and a half ago was cut 30%. The department cut was 10, but ours get whacked for 30. And the people who are left are scrambling, trying to figure out how they're going to do their jobs this coming Monday morning because of this huge staff cut. But they're going to find a way, and it's going to get done. And it's because the Secretary of Defense said, this is how much money you have. This is all we can afford. I'm sorry, this is all we got. I think the voters told us that last week. I think they told us that last year. And they don't really care what an economist is going to come in and tell them they can or can't afford. Facts, my facts you might disagree with, you might disagree with. Your facts I might disagree with. But we're going to have to be real careful we're going to have to be pretty much unanimous if we're going to use this kind of thing to come up with what we think is affordable in Goffstown, because it's the voters who put us here, and they're telling us what's affordable. I don't know. Sure, I'll consider what an economist has to say, but...
Well, I didn't mean for them to say
Mark,
what's
hang on,
affordable and what
Elizabeth.
isn't.
Hang on. What I want to do is go around and hang on to that, because we have other couple of people
right.
waiting as well. So Scott, and then go to Ivan, I'll come back to Elizabeth.
You know, I'm okay with, I do think both as a selectman and as a budget committee member, you have to have a good handle on what are some of the economic indicators, both locally and at the state level. I don't know how you can do this job, because you are basing a budget and you have to know what the state of the economy is and what the revenues are and what you're you have to. But that being said, maybe there's some agreement about having a discussion about what are some of the things we may take a look at, whether it be incomes, whether it be unemployment rates, whether it be solvencies of pension funds or contributions to pension funds, whatever you want, however we want to take a look at it. But the interesting thing, and again, and for the record here, I think Bill Bates and I have a pretty decent relationship. We disagree on things, but I like Bill as a person, and I think it's the same way, but we may jaw at each other. But so the fact of the matter is that Bill may have, argued one particular thing. I came back with, well, but the unemployment rate is lower, et cetera. So it's a matter of if we can agree on what are some of the things that we're looking at. Because just like you had mentioned about maybe some of the glass, half empty things as the pension liability, I can come back and say, yeah, we have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country here in New Hampshire. So again, where can we, come up with that meeting of the minds? But what happens, I think, is that some of that, the community does buy into a lot of its perception, and our economy is based upon, perception. If people think things are going very horrible, then all of a sudden they do not spend money. There's contraction there. So it is important for people to know, but I think ultimately, I try to make my decisions on what are some of the economic indicators. I look at how many people are not paying their taxes on time, or do we have any what are the foreclosures? You do look at those things. I try not to make my decisions based upon a small segment of people who may have went into foreclosure, because I know that there are high 90s where they didn't. But it does weigh on me, and I think it probably moves me off of that to a mark. But by the same token, there are people here who are more conservative, I think, who hear some of the needs in the schools of the town or the fire truck, and they're like, you know what, I don't want to spend this money, but public safety is important. I think we got it. So I just think we just have to come to the, try to agree where we can agree and disagree where we disagree, and let it be at that. I'm not, the New Hampshire Bureau of Labor Statistics will give you a wealth of information on New Hampshire. So if you want that, you go on that website, and that's official stuff. And if there's any other, Bill Gordon gave us some stuff about incomes. It is what it is. I mean, median income. So we can look at that data. So we want to have a scorecard or something like that to take a look at that and agree on which ones we're gonna keep track of. I have no problem with that.
No, we can talk about it. statistics are tough, and because without the baseline, I like to see the baseline data underneath it. Do you have some?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up, and I think
Come back to you,
Elizabeth
Elizabeth.
brought up a great point about certainly working together, but letting somebody know up front. And we had done that last year. We had this discussion last year, and in the May-June timeframe, we requested all the governing bodies and the departments to come through with a scenario with a 10% cut, a 5% cut, and a flat budget. And we discussed that, and the fire and police did. They did that. They presented us the scenario that we requested with a 10%, 5%, and 0. The school did not respond to that approach, but we did use that last year. And so I sort of said what I'd like to do, but the other side of that is what I think we shouldn't do. And we did this 3 years ago. Now, this is just the school budget, and this is 266 pages, it's about 2,100 lines. And we went through this 2 or 3 nights a week, 2 or 3 months, and the threat was to go to 2 or 3 a.m. So my question to each one of us is, do we want to do that just for the school, for instance? Do we want to go through 2,100 lines and negotiate $50 here, $20 there, and amendment, I'd like to amend your amendment, and all that stuff? And I don't know how many members, where are all the 3 year ago people? We spent hours, yeah, remember? And the threat was we would go till 5 a.m. Do you want to stay here till 5 a.m.?
Yes.
Because, good, okay, yeah, that was,
I've done it.
yeah, I know.
No.
I have certainly understood that was the intent, and until something got passed, we were gonna stay here till 5 a.m. We only had a couple, 1 or 2 a.m. But I mean, that's an open question. If we're willing to stay here 2 nights a week, or 3 nights a week till 5 a.m., I personally, my opinion, I would be against that. Given, and the final argument for that is, given that it's a bottom line budget. So we do all that, we agree with all the lines, we nail them, except it doesn't mean anything at all, because it's a bottom line budget. Any department head can shift numbers around as they want, and they should do that. They absolutely should do that. So the exercise of putting dozens and hundreds of hours into going through all these lines, to a large degree, based on its SB2 bottom line budget, seems to me to be irrelevant.
So your suggestion, your argument is to focus on the MS7 and MS27 lines?
The bottom line, the big picture, the macro, the level of available funding.
Okay, and I'm leaning you towards the MS7 and MS27 subtotals?
Yes.
Okay, because we have to do that.
I understand.
There was 1 year that we didn't do that, and
Yes.
we were kind of told we didn't do that, and.
We had never done, that was never done, I doubt.
Well,
The first year we did it was the first year it was done.
Yeah, but by de facto, by producing a budget in detail, in more detail than the MS27 and the MS7, we by de facto did it by that level. And there were a couple of years that we just did it at the absolutely bottom line. And that's what happened, and we find out we had to come back
Because I
in a couple of
frankly,
days and do that, so.
I have never, does the school
Okay.
budget do this?
Does the school
How
board?
many hours, days, how many 5 a.m. evenings?
Oh,
does
school
the
board, you mean,
have?
school board.
How's the school board?
They
I-
go through it line by line.
Have they done it? Okay, I've watched a lot, I've been to a few of the meetings,
I
I've
know,
watched,
I know.
I've never seen it.
I know personally, when I was in the school board, I forced us to go line by line and get explanation of every dollar that was put in there. And I was actually one that asked them to provide additional information when I was on the school board.
And then the budget committee would do the same thing.
And the budget, I also asked the same questions when I was on the budget committee. I upset Dan quite a bit at times, and I think Scott, because I think Scott was the school board representative at that time.
You did
because
upset me.
I still do it. That's my job. But there's different ways of doing it. I understand what you're saying. I don't think this is where Dan wants to go with this.
Well,
discussion.
it's, if we leave it at the high level, that's good. The high level is, now we now have some opinions where Ivan is saying, I want to stay more at the macro level because of the experience this past year was, we did what we did and came up with a very detailed budget, and the next thing we know, it was posted on the web prior to the public hearing. Well, if you do that, that's not what it's gonna look like anyway. And so it was kind of why did we do it? That's what I believe I'm hearing Ivan say.
And
And-
I can understand that,
And you would rather stay with some of the details. I agree that looking
Well,
at
I'm a detail
details
person, you know that.
brings up, and so am I. But without looking at the details, I think there's a mix we can get to.
Oh, sure, there's certain things that you
So
can do that at.
let's think about that, okay? And that's part of the question that Lisa asked, what do you mean by, and I had my note here that said, functional analysis. How are we gonna function, how are we gonna do that analysis, at what point, and it's gonna be driven by you guys.
And
How deep do you wanna go? Do you wanna just stay at the top? Do you wanna work yourself? Do you wanna find someplace in between? We can do both.
And, you know, in what I do outside of town stuff, I develop budgets and work with budgets, and I look at them from two different ways. You know, I look at them from very much detail, and then I look at them from a global, big picture, I wanna be in this ballpark, where those two numbers meet, like you said, Dan.
Yep.
Come somewhere in between, so looking at them two different ways. So, I understand what you're saying, but I also think to be able to make some decisions, you need to look at the detail. To be able to feel comfortable when you walk out of this room that the decision that we make as a group has some basis as to those decisions.
Elizabeth wanted to comment, and then I think, Jen, you had your hand up too, right?
Yeah, I had a couple of different comments. I didn't mean at all that an economist would come in and tell us what we could afford. I meant that an economist could come in and give us pick somebody out of town because they wouldn't have anything to gain or lose from it, but also that they could give us some perspective and some sort of overview. Because I don't want to be sitting here for however many meetings this year trading statistic back and forth, bad statistic and good statistic, good anecdote versus bad anecdote, and go back and forth and back. I just don't think that's productive. I think it's much better to have some sort of a foundation. If we want to find those statistics ourselves, you're right, they're slippery, but we can try and do them. That's one comment. And I think on this idea, I mean, I totally see your point about why go through all this when it's just going to get overwritten anyways. But the flip side of that is I think we have to be willing to accept then when the department heads and the schools come back and say, well, the result of whatever number we decide is going to be such and such reduction to service. Because I think people have a right to know that that's what they're voting for. That if they want less taxes, that's fine, but it's going to result in these reductions in services and make their own decision on that basis. So, I mean, you're right. That is one way to go. And to be honest, I'm not sure which way I feel about this. But I think we have to be willing then to accept what other people say.
Jen?
I just want to say I'm happy to defer my comments if you wanted to move on to something else. If not, if you're going to stay on this topic, then I will comment.
We're gonna stay on the
We're gonna
topic, go
stay on
ahead.
this topic. Okay, great. I'm intrigued kind of by what Ivan has said, and I'd like to learn more about what your vision and what you're thinking, how that process would look, because I went line by line personally. You know, I went line by line in all of these budgets, and what I found through that process is that I kind of had to take on the hat of police chief, of fire chief, of school superintendent, and those aren't things that I am learned in. That is, I do not have the right knowledge base to decide to cut a certain position, and even asking the questions regarding that. So for me, it was personally challenging to go line by line and say, well, sure, I guess we can cut that because I don't know what it is. Or, you know, well, they didn't justify it in the 2 minutes we gave them to justify that, when it could, and it came to the end, you know, on the school side, for example, that some of these things affected accreditation, and it just got deeper and deeper and deeper. So I don't want to get into a position where I feel like I have to become, you know, an expert in a lot of these areas. I think it's helpful. So I think if we can find a happy medium between the macro and the micro, and because I definitely heard what you were saying too, Phil, and that you do have to dribble down to the lines to understand what the impact is going to be. And that was something I said a lot. What's the impact of that going to be? That was like ad nauseum out of my mouth through this season. So I guess that would just be, I'd love to learn more, though, Ivan, about how you would approach it, I guess, on the macro level.
And we can set some time aside at the next meeting to do that.
Yeah, or I can talk to you outside of this, yeah.
Yeah, so at that point, it was good to ask the question, because that's what we're talking about. How do we want to organize ourselves, and how do we want to go forward? Guy had his hand up, and then Bill Gordon.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on the idea about affordability. and having the department heads, understand and make sure that the taxpayers know what services would be lost if certain budgets, or revenue, not revenue, but if certain budgets were proposed. That happened this year on the school side. We put forth a budget, and the school came back and sort of published what would happen to the school district if this budget passed. And you know what? The voters went in and said default budget, which was that close to our own. So now that we're all here, and we've all been elected to continue this for the second year in a row, I don't see any problem. The voters already know what services they are allegedly going to lose now because the default budget passed on the school side. It's our job, because don't forget, according to RSA 32, our job is to prepare a budget, okay? But it's more than that. Our job is to prepare a budget on behalf of the people who put us here. If it wasn't, we could just hire a company to do it. That's not how this works. They elect us to represent their best interests. Without us, the town and the school can come forward and say, here's the budgets. That's it. And your taxes are going to be X. That's it. And the default budget is your only other option. We're here to say, okay, yeah, this is good, this doesn't make sense, this does, this doesn't, and present it to the voters. I'm not going to go into the whole thing about what I feel about SB 2 and deliberative sessions, but the message was crystal clear to all of us this year. Okay? It's more than just preparing a budget. It's doing so on their behalf, and they are well aware of what services they might or might not lose by the votes that they cast last week.
And to be totally transparent, for the 20% of the registered voters who participated, and that number is actually going to go up, that percentage, and this is why statistics can lie if you don't look at the base numbers. That percentage is probably going to go up maybe another 5%, so that 25% of registered voters, because you're in a year right now where they're going to do what they call a purge, a checklist purge. They're going to go through and find everybody on the checklist who has not voted in 4 years, and they're coming off. And there are thousands of them in Goffstown on that checklist that falls within that category. So when you take 1,000 or 1,600, I can't remember the number exactly, off the 26,000, so your participation rate just went up because the denominator went down, okay? So that's why I don't like statistics, but for everybody who went, it was a pretty close to 65-35%, a little over 65-35, that went to a default budget on that side, and some of the other, I don't want to get into interpreting the information, but that's where I wanted to go. I got Bill Gordon.
We've talked a lot about statistics and data that has been brought in, particularly perhaps by, I'll use names, Guy or myself or Ivan. And the reason I believe, or at least I bring that in, is numbers are something that I can relate to in looking at many issues that are very emotional. Public safety, education, those things are very emotional issues. And each person has a personal level of involvement in that. Logic against emotion is a real tough battleground to be in. And we have to make solid decisions. I favor emotion, basing as best I can upon how I can ferret information out of statistics and performance. Emotions I have to push to the back burner.
Okay. Anything further on that piece? And we'll probably do a little more. Final thought, Ivan?
I was just saying, the unfortunate part, as we've learned in the last 2 or 3 years, for any serious budgeting, I mean, when you take personnel lines off the table, so to speak, where in the school system, 75% of the budget is of labor, and in the police, in the fire, it's 80%. And when you went into the fire, did I say that wrong? Fire is 80%.
I think it was higher than that.
Police is 92. So 92% of the police budget is salary lines. So if we ever get forced into a situation where you have to really cut millions, I mean, you can't, we're gonna have to eliminate road salt and fuel oil and everything else if we're not gonna touch those salary lines. And that's unfortunate, but it makes this budgeting process really difficult, because 3/4, 80, 90% of these budgets are personnel lines. So for any serious kind of budgeting, you have to look there. You can't save millions of dollars looking at $50 savings in numbers of erasers or paper. It's those big ticket items that have to be looked at, and that's where they pay us the big bucks to, or not.
Okay, Checker?
I don't think anyone's disputing that we need numbers to be brought in and looked at. I think that the point was that if we could find numbers that come from an unbiased source, in that they're brought in from someone outside of Goffstown who is not involved in our economic situation here in town, those might be numbers that we wouldn't have to dispute as much. My numbers are different than yours, which are different than yours. Well, I got them off this website, I got them off that. So I don't think anyone is disputing the use of numbers and needing numbers, and getting emotional. I think it really is about where those numbers come from, and are they the trusted sources because they are coming from a non-biased source.
From my perspective and my position, I am not in favor
Yeah.
of paying anyone to bring those numbers to this table that has 16 members. We've been doing a budget for a long time. I don't like percentages. I don't like statistics. I like the data behind them, because I can create any kind of statistic you would like for any particular reason to shine in any particular direction, using the same kind of base numbers. It all depends on what you do and how you present them. So it's the base numbers, and the national average is this. Well, what's that got to do to little Goffstown, New Hampshire? What's going on here? You know, we talk about the unemployment rate is peaking around 10 or so, but in New Hampshire it's 6. Well, what is it in Goffstown? Where do we even want to get that number, and how is that going to affect your decision? That's my question for you guys. Who's going to use that to affect their decision when we go to play with a budget? Is that important? To me, it might not be so important. To you, it might be important.
I think the problem is this, is that when we have these discussions around the table, and we hear people talking about 10% unemployment, by the way, I think it's under 9 and nationally, and it's 5.4% as of recent in New Hampshire, it leads people to believe that it's doom and gloom, potentially, or that it could be overly optimistic, okay? I'm going to give you both scenarios. So you may have one person who's painting this rosy picture of the world, let's spend, and then on the flip side, it's that the world is going to end tomorrow, crisis is going to be everywhere, and we have to cut. But the reality is where do you get the data that is simply the number, okay? And that is an unbiased source, okay? Because quite frankly, I don't give a darn about, some website, okay, that somebody likes to pull, whether it's, ultra-conservative or ultra-liberal. I could care less. I just want what is the fact. That's how kind of I make, how I make my decisions. And, when we talked about this whole thing about, I know a lot of people who are unemployed or underemployed. Well, that's all anecdotal as far as I'm concerned. And am I going to make decisions for the 100 more people who might have been unemployed in Goffstown and go very draconian one way or another? Or the fact that we had 2% unemployment that I can go and spend all this money? No. So, I mean, but the difficulty is, and I just want to get back to something that Guy said, is that, the voters did send a message. But they sent a message, again, particularly, I think, on the school side, and I said this at our last meeting, is that the number it was $1.1 million more than the default in a recovering economy. I mean, I've been doing this for 10, 12 years, and you have too, and those numbers didn't fly when we were in a good economy. To think that we were talking about a 5.2% increase in a difficult economy, or even a recovering economy, doesn't make sense.
Right.
Okay? And despite conversations with some folks about, hey, try to be a little bit, more reasonable here, and maybe you'll get something as opposed to nothing, that didn't occur. And maybe the message will go towards the school board to say, hey, you need to recognize what's going on. I don't know, Guy, if that budget was $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 more than the default, if it would have passed. I don't know. I don't know if it would. I don't know if it would have been. If it would have failed by this much, and what message that would have sent. But I'm not reading any tea leaves because it died on a 1.1 over the default. When I look back at 12 years of history, and when I was prior to me being on the school board, they had 6 or 7 years of default budgets because they did the same exact thing. It was 800,000 more than default, 900,000, and Dan, you know this, okay? And then, when they finally said, hey, we need to be a little bit more modest in terms of these differences, the budget started to pass. So, maybe lessons will be learned. Maybe we'll learn from history. But I think that what I'd like to see is, I just want to tell you my own personal feeling. This is not the Board of Selectmen, this is just me. When we went through the exercise, the town did honor, what you wanted to do in terms of the, 5%, 10%, et cetera. But at the end of the day, when we looked at all of that, and maybe that was a good thing, we said, you know what, level funding looks like level tax rate is the route that we would if I would have known that, it would have saved a lot of time. So I guess where I'm going is, where are we going from, as your selectman, if you kind of know, and maybe May is too early, maybe it's August or September, let's get a better feel as the time goes on. If you're going back to that same thing, level funded tax rate, or if you're saying, hey, we're willing to see a modest increase in taxes of 1% or 2%, then let us kind of know what that range is, and then we'll develop a budget that'll fall within that. I think I could be wrong here, but I don't think that the community really was in big favor of these 10% cuts. I didn't see that.
I think what it did was, as we were looking for additional information, I'm going to tell you what I got out of that. I got out of that by looking at the various departments saying, okay, this is how I feel I could run the particular services, or what services I couldn't run with that kind of a drastic reduction. Okay, this is what you would lose. And from my perspective, it's like palatable, not palatable. I can almost take my budget committee hat off for a moment and say, gee whiz, do I want to do that, don't want to do that, then throw it back on and say, if something were to happen to the economy, which didn't happen, which was massive layoffs, all kinds of things, and we saw we may have had to do something like that. So, one, it was there, but two, it gave us an indication of what reality might look like if that would occur. Let's defer to the school. We actually got a picture of that through the back door by actions of the committee as a whole. Went to, in December, a few days before Christmas, came up with a number that we had to go to public hearing. And it wasn't so long after that, we got what it would look like if that budget were to be presented. It would have been nice to have that before we pass the information. And that's kind of like what we're sharing with the town. What would it look like? If we had that before, we could say, okay, so you can't do this because of what? That interaction didn't happen. And sometimes when you don't know the question to ask, you don't get something back. And we were hoping to get it from the other side. And maybe we can help that along this year. Something to talk about earlier. What are some of the things that can happen? Let's look at some of the statistics. New Hampshire likes to have statistics of a certain number of kids per classroom. That's the thing they're headed for. I don't know how much of us know that. They are saying you have to have, and what drives me nuts is some of these RSAs that now force things upon a school that they supposedly have no choice on, that if that's the problem, then maybe in our other lives we can go and attack that at the state legislative level. Remember about, I don't know, not quite half a dozen years ago, 3-4 years ago, they were at 9.5 counselors. The kindergarten opened, and they were looking to put a half a counselor. It didn't cost us half a counselor, it cost us 1.5 counselors. Because state law said, once you get 10 full-time equivalents, you need a boss for the counselors. Drives me nuts. Why can't a school decide if they need a special boss for the counselors? Why did it have to be that? I was going down that road because those are some surprises that maybe we don't know about. Would be nice to know that while we're making our decisions.
Well, and just so you know, that happened after the kindergarten had a counselor, not before.
Before, it was something else for some other
The
kids.
high
And
school.
the other, if I could,
Okay.
just at one point.
Thank you.
It was a very, the one thing that is a positive is that this is a moderating, it does moderate things to a degree, the Budget Committee. And trying to, this was an interesting election to try to read some of the tea leaves, I think. But one of the things that I got out of this was, yes, there needs to be fiscal, constraint on spending to a degree. I don't think that the community wanted to give up a lot of things. And if when you look at some of the things that they did vote for on separate articles, I was pleased in some of those, okay?
Yeah.
That being
The ones that
said,
passed.
right, that being said, on a revenue generating side, you have 2 new members of the planning board. So somehow the message has gotten out to say, hey, we got to worry about not so much the spending side, but how can we get more business in this community?
Yeah.
So I think the community is looking at this big picture. They're looking at the spending, looking at the needs and the wants and the revenues. That's what I've seen from this election.
Dan?
I was gonna ask for final thoughts before I segue to this, so.
I got
Mr.
a whole
Dillon?
bunch. No.
Oh my, he's been over there typing.
No, I thought of something, so I wanted to mention it. So, on November 13th, the school did, they did to some extent paint a 10% scenario, negative 10% in their slideshow to us on November 13th. 2 slides on their show, the 10% question. It would equate to 4.9 million reduction. What would this look like? That's the total budgets of Maple and Glen Ave and 48,
Okay, go back to that slide and say
Yeah.
that again, because that's not a 10%, you can't say
Oh,
I'm gonna shut down
hang
a
on.
school.
No, I know you, and I agree with that.
Okay,
So my basic point is, they did respond to the 10% scenario with 2 slides and maybe some more discussion when they presented the slides. The second slide says, oh, no, I'm going the wrong way. The second slide says, or that amount would equal 48 teachers, 3 administrators, 17 paraeducators, 4 secretaries, 3 custodians, part-time technician, 13,000 in water costs, 95,000 in maintenance costs, on and on, electricity, propane, oil. So we need to give them,
That-
we need to give them credit for
if
that.
that would be someplace that would, okay.
On the other hand, I think it was, as a couple people said, I think it was productive how it actually went. I mean, I think it's an art and it's, there's unpredictable aspects, but, as somebody said, we came up with a budget, we did our best. And then and I think there was discussion after that. We heard from the public forum. The school board and the SAU responded with a couple different documents saying what those cuts would mean. They responded line by line in a PDF to our cuts. Some they argued with, some they didn't, so I thought that was productive. We came back in January, altered our budget, and then it goes to deliberative. So I thought it wasn't perfect, but it was productive.
We followed the process, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
We followed the process, and one of the things you're gonna find that I try to do is follow the process. Not to take into consideration when we started where it wasn't very organized, and there was a reason it wasn't very organized, because I was hesitant to putting something after, because I wasn't necessarily assuming that I would continue the chairmanship, and so I really didn't plan something ahead. I just threw a couple of notes down. Hopefully, it's gonna get better as we go across, because we get there. Any further mention before I explain the choice for contact info and assignments? Okay, let's segue to that. If you have this or don't have this, what I think we're gonna do, I see it's 9:15, and I'm not gonna make you wait here while we go through this whole thing. I'd like to take them back If you have them here, great. If you don't, can you get them to me very quickly? And so I will get out to the whole group before the weekend where we are.
I have a question.
Yeah,
But let me
do too.
explain this,
Yeah.
if I can explain this,
Who's
okay?
gonna explain it?
I'd like to explain this first. Before you pass them in, I'd like to explain it. Now that we've talked, there's a town side and there's a school side, okay? On the town side, there are 6 departments. On the school, there are 5 boxes that say school and 5 boxes that say MS-27. If all 3 of your choices are on the town side, that's kind of easy. You just can put 1, 2, 3 as where you would like to go. But if you have a choice that falls onto the school side at all, what it would be the boxes that have the department names and the boxes that have the school name, okay? 1 over here, or 2 over here, 1 over here, 2 over here, 1 over here, you see what I'm saying? The interesting part goes to the MS-27. If you fill any of your choices to be one of the schools, put a choice of 1, 2, 3 in the MS-27 to see which category you would like to analyze. Okay, I would want to analyze that one first. If you have any part, that way, if you do get assigned to the school side, you're going to get assigned an MS-27 total line to review, or to take a peek at, or to see how it's trending, or we'll morph it through. Does that make sense? Do we have any?
I still have a question.
Yes.
Oh, what about a CIP rep? Is that different than representing
We
a
don't have a
department?
CIP rep. And one of the reasons why, last year, they traditionally had someone from the Budget Committee sitting on a CIP. We will go for a group. I had no volunteers last year to be on that. And I came back and I told CIP that what happens with CIP is, to me, it's like a governing body, okay? Which we don't have anybody sitting on this Board of Selectmen who votes on their budget, then comes before us where we vote on the budget again. It didn't make sense for me to appoint someone to a CIP where that Budget Committee member now votes for something and then has to come here and vote on that. I mean, they're now trying to defend their own work. And that was counterintuitive for that to happen for me. Now, if they're willing to have someone from the Budget Committee, and you guys as a majority want somebody to sit on that, let's talk about that. That is not a unilateral decision by me. It was made by me because I didn't have any volunteers last year, and that's how I reasoned it out. It didn't make sense to me. Do you have thoughts on that,
Yeah,
Scott?
I do. I believe it will serve the same purpose of going and visiting a department head. It gives one person on this committee a lot of insight as to what are some of the capital needs that are gonna be presented to us in a budget. And, so when someone does have a question, they'll know, the reason why we're talking about this, replacement of a VACON truck is X, Y, and Z. And by the way, if you need any material, I can send it to you. So it just gives you, more information. So even if the Budget Committee rep, to CIP didn't even vote, the fact that they were there, and if they heard these different presentations, and they knew what some of the issues were, cannot be of any harm, in my opinion.
Total valid point.
Yep.
Valid point. And whether they want to be a voting member or not, I believe if this committee wants to send someone as a voting member, then they should take direction from this committee, not individually voting, but direction from the committee to vote. Does that make sense? Just like you're sitting here, sometimes you vote that may not be the way you would personally vote, but you vote for your committee. The problem to that, traditionally, this committee has taken the July meeting and the August meeting off, because sometimes we don't have a quorum on any particular time to actually do it in the summer months. That is prime CIP meeting months. It's the end of June, July, and maybe the beginning of August. So that just completely throws that whole, what direction do you give them at the July meeting in order to vote going into the CIP? And it throws that out. Guy?
The tricky part there is the voting, because
Agreed.
it's a budget forming
It is.
committee, but we don't have a vote on the school board, and we don't have a vote on the Board of Selectmen. In fact, we don't even have a rep over there.
Budget, I'm sorry, it's not budget forming.
It's
planning.
It's a budget that ends up coming before this committee.
Actually,
It's
it goes
purposes
to,
planning. It's planning board.
it goes to the planning board first, then to you guys, then to us.
But it ends up here.
Right, it's a recommendation that's circular.
It's a recommendation of slotting expenditures. That's really all that it is. So they prioritize the needs and they move things around,
But
and
it-
then it goes to the governing boards, and the governing, I'll tell you, there's a lot of times when then we get it and we're like, well, that's great that you think that this is really important, but we can't afford
But
it.
it ends up here, and then it
Back
ends up
here.
in front of the voters.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I don't think, unless we were to have voting seats on the other two budget
Yeah.
preparing
It's-
committee, I would think that
It's not, but
it
it's
would not be,
CIP is not a budget preparing,
it's
board.
part of the town budget, Scott.
no, it's
It's
not.
process.
It's a process
Could it
by
be
which
part
you
of the
plan your
process?
capital expenditures. It's actually, it's derived from a planning RSA, not a budget
Okay.
RSA.
Did not the police cruisers in CIP end up in the budget?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, but
That's my case.
but it's for planning purposes. It's not for, it's derived from planning RSAs, not from budget RSAs.
But the CIP, everything that's the CIP did not end up in this budget. Pieces of it end
No,
up in.
pieces of it fortunately went out
It's for
to-
planning what the budget's going to be. I mean, they work
And
together.
it's for forecasting so that you try to level out your tax rate. That's
I understand.
that's kind of what the purpose is, and
I
it's
understand.
not like.
I would have a problem with
To
a
give you a
voting member.
classic example, there are many times where, as I've been on it for both, as a selectman and as a school board member, where I voted to slot it in a certain, year,
Mhm.
okay? And then, that same year, I voted not to put it on a ballot. So I'm not,
That was the desire of the school board?
what?
You were representing the school board, right?
Right, but when I sit on CIP, it's my own, I don't get direction as to, you're gonna slot it here, 'cause it's a planning document. Then when it comes to me as a budgetary item, then I have my own free will to vote on it. And I'm telling you flat out that there were times when I slotted something as a priority for, say, a current year,
Yeah.
and then when we got to the budget process, I'm like, that's great, we can't afford it. And we're like, let's defer it for another year. It happens all the
Good
time.
point.
Or we could just make it a non-voting member. I mean, the important part is to
To
attend
get the
CIP and
information,
get
to-
the
you get
information
more-
and
you
to
get
understand.
more
It's not
out
the
of it.
voting
that's the
part
first-
that's really
yeah.
critical.
Sure, I mean, two things. One, I put that on the agenda for next month, and the funny part about that, Elizabeth, is for every other year that I've done this, there was a little box in here that said CIP you could check off if you were interested. I took that out last Sunday.
Yeah, but we know
On
who's
here-
going to CIP.
You know where that's
I know,
coming
that's
from,
great.
Elizabeth, whoever talks a lot about it.
Only
So-
if it takes place of my other assignment.
It doesn't take place, it's an
Oh,
addition
wow.
to another assignment.
And maybe we need to do it on a rotating basis. as
Which
we've
is
done it.
a potential if you have people who wanna rotate and do that. Now, you'd see where we're having the same problem I had last year.
What, lack of volunteers?
Yes.
Yeah.
But Dan, last
Believe me,
year,
I know
I
about
put a
that.
check mark on that.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, Dan.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem.
Uh-oh.
Is Dick an elected member of this committee?
No.
I have a problem at the RSA's
You know, if
putting
you gotta
us on.
volunteer, you
It
gotta
says-
volunteer, Dan, come on.
I think in the RSA's it says that
I've never
everybody is
looked.
a member of
Right.
this
You
committee.
have,
Now,
you have a total vote,
If you go back,
absolutely.
if you go back and say, is he elected? And I'm not, I'm not.
As a, I
If-
haven't
if
read the planning
The
board, Dick.
people,
I
the
have no
people
idea
of
what
a
that's
lot
a
of
valid
precincts
point.
elected me as a commissioner, and the commissioner appointed me to come here and do this.
Correct. For your particular district, the water
Well,
district.
But
I
be a member of
never,
this committee, though.
And,
he is a full-blown voting member of this committee, absolutely.
and the school board assigned somebody here, which was Sue, and she was on that committee.
Not representing this committee.
No, she was on the CIP committee, so she
From
was
the
able
school
to,
board.
she was able to report back what happened.
Yeah.
you
Right.
know.
So
Now, if it
why
was
don't
a
we?
non-voting member, then
I'm
that,
not-
even that wouldn't
It
be an
could be
issue,
anything.
right?
It could be anything. If you're
No.
coming back to us to get information, that's
Okay.
fine too. It's,
But,
having, anybody can attend the meeting for that
But-
purpose, but
but-
having a member being able to ask a question at the table is different from a member of the public sitting in the gallery. RSA 91A does not guarantee anyone from the gallery to participate in a meeting, but it guarantees their ability to hear and see and videotape and all that other kind of stuff.
And I respect you as the chairman and your decisions, and I'm not trying to challenge you in any way. But as long as I've been affiliated with the budget committee
Yeah.
in the past, everybody got assigned something to do. And I've been on the Parks and Recreation, I've been on the fire, I've been on the police.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, because as a member of, your job is to come and report on the village district,
Yes.
from what I've
Yeah,
written.
I understand that,
And
I
that's,
understand.
okay.
Dan, if I.
He's offering up.
Yeah, yeah, he is. He has every year. That's one thing about Dick. He's the first one that gives me his form, and the first one he says, I wanna look at something else, and from my reading of the statute, it's the elected members who are supposed to be dealing with the department heads in the schools, and you all bring something, and what Dick is bringing is the Goffstown Village District.
And I have heard in the past 2 years about the CIP committee and the budget committee not being represented, you know? So the CIP committee is even saying that themselves.
Yeah.
I mean,
Getting a bad reputation.
it's,
I'm
not-
defending that without a problem.
You're not
It's
just getting
not-
it now.
I don't think it's good PR for the budget committee or any of it.
What I'm gonna do is, I will do this, I will try to take a peek at the RSA that, if you can give it at me, Scott, that surrounds the planning board, because I've never delved into that particular, I've delved in the budget committee, from there I never saw
Yeah.
the budget committee being pulled in, but if you find that,
Something, I don't even know, Joanne, do you know? 682?
676.
Yeah, something, I know it's in the 600s.
6670, wow, that's a high number.
676.
Oh, 676.
I
Let me
don't
see if I
think
can't,
And CIP is specifically in those RSAs.
for today, all right, let me grab that paper again, you got,
The CIP committee did adopt, when John Caprio was on that committee, did
reading
adopt,
back the minutes.
rules for CIP to follow, and they're in those rules.
Who did
They're-
that?
The CIP committee did, and ultimately the planning board. And in those rules, it said who would be on the committee, because the RSA doesn't say who's on the CIP committee. The RSA just says you can have CIP.
You can have,
committee.
right, doesn't talk about membership.
Exactly, because all
Because
towns do it differently.
they appoint somebody large,
Yeah, right, they're members at
a
large.
couple of
Right,
them, you know?
I remember that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But there is a document that the town adopted when John Caprio was on CIP that guides the CIP committee. And as far as I know, it's still in effect.
As you go ahead and fill this out, if you wanna indicate something on the paper that you would be willing to volunteer for to be the CIP, to attend the CIP meetings, or attend one or two of the CIP meetings, why don't you go ahead and indicate that down there, because, something is better than nothing, I guess, and if we do that, if you have this filled out, why don't you go ahead and give it to me, and I will compile the data, take a peek at it, and, I'll get back to you via email, how's that? Rather than, because usually, sometimes we've had this done, we've had some great discussions tonight on process where we
have a good
haven't
one.
had in the past.
So, do you have a blank?
No.
You can email it to Dan later.
Okay, I got Steve's, I'm taking inventory.
I'm a teacher.
Was it open?
Thank you.
Dan, can I ask a question?
Yes,
So you're gonna compile it, and then at the next meeting, you're gonna email it to us with
you're
our
gonna get this,
assignments? Or-
you're gonna get a list of everybody's. I have a consolidated sheet that looks like that. I have a sheet in a form with something for everything. I will send it. What's gonna happen, if you wanna stay here for another 15, 20 minutes while I go through that, okay, that's where I was talking. So this year, what I'd like to do is just go ahead and, one, I wanna make sure I have everybody's sheet. And it was you I was thinking about, by the way, Francesca, or excuse me, Checker, when I put, that's new for this year, optional nickname.
Oh, I would have written it. Because when people say Francesca, I don't usually respond. I don't really think of it as my name.
So you prefer checker?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where we're
Check.
going. Lisa doesn't wanna be called anything, there's a dash there, only kidding.
Well, it said nickname.
We'll
If
come
you
up
put a
with it.
dash, I'd
It's how
want
do you,
someone to
how do you
fill
shorten
in.
it? L?
Right.
Yeah.
Yo.
L.
Elizabeth, so, Bill is not here. Ivan, did I get one from you, or did I not get one from you?
A sheet, no. I'll
Okay.
email it to you.
You'll send it to me, okay, great. And hopefully, oh, John Dillon, did you send anything?
I just handed it to you.
There it is, right there. So who did I check off?
Me?
Phil Kendall, you're working on it.
I'm gonna email it to you right now.
All right.
And we don't have to do one, right?
That's right, you don't have, actually, Dick has done one every year because he's volunteered for a bunch of stuff.
I'm showing you up.
That's good.
So,
He's more than
is there anything else you guys wanted to chat about functional analysis, the budget prep process? We know what we're gonna do next month. We're gonna talk a little bit more about how you wanna prepare for the budget. When you get your assignments, I'm also gonna send them to, I'm not sure who's gonna be responsible for, Neil gonna put them up on the website
Yeah,
then?
Neil
Because
would do that.
Janice was the
Yeah.
the lead on that. So that'll go up on the web. What I forgot to do, and you can tell me, if you'd like, how much of this information, I don't wanna publish all of this information you gave me. What I'm gonna take is all of this information you gave me outside of your name and your address in Goffstown, cause that's part of what you do. Let me know if we wanna publish a telephone number for a taxpayer or a citizen to be able to call you if they wanted to, which one that would be.
You're elected officials, for crying out loud. You should post your phone numbers and emails.
Mine is.
And
Okay.
pictures.
Well, I don't know.
I don't know, there's some
Carried
pictures
away
I
there.
don't really
Leave it
want.
photogenic.
So,
I would agree.
what I will do is
Phone
send
calls,
out,
you
just
should
let
go.
me know what it is, cause some of these emails, my email now, I actually changed it from the one I used for my other business to Goffstown Budget, at Comcast.net, and that's worked out really well, cause I know anything that's coming in that box is you guys, and I can pay attention, you guys and other people, believe me. So I can pay attention to that, and send it from there. So if there's nothing else you guys have, the next regular meeting will be Wednesday, April 13th, okay? April 13th is a Wednesday. We start at 7 PM down here. I'll send reminders, because it's been a long time, it's always been the same time, then this gets a little different, okay? We all good with that?
Excellent.
Any other thing that I need to follow up with you guys and get to you except for your assignments? I believe the department's heads are ready for, if you get assigned the town, for contact from you. So that's when I give it to the town, they'll know. I'll also send the school assignments to the SAU, so they can give them to the principals in anticipation of some contact from there. Traditionally, the schools have said, well, the principals, they gotta wait from some indication from the SAU and the school board. I mean, you can talk to John and to Jen to find out what occurred last year. There was some difficulty starting off, if I remember correctly. And I don't know if that's gonna happen again and how that'll work, but give it your best shot, we'll work through it. Questions, comments? Final sayings? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
That was Bill Gordon. Ivan seconds. Show
You're
of
on the wrong side of the table.
No, you're right.
show of hands, all to adjourn. That is, if I see Phil, okay, we are filled. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank
We
you,
are
Mayor.
adjourned.